coming. I would like to call to order the Oregon Area Fire EMS District Commission, July 30th, 2025. Roll call. Tim LeBron.
Here.
Tim Higgins.
Here.
Jeff Hodgson.
Here.
Phil Van Kampen.
Here.
Kemp Knudsen here. Would each town please do their roll call? Town of Dunn.
Sure. Town of Dunn roll call. Chair Greb.
Here.
Supervisor Gaussman. Here. Supervisor Hodgson.
Here.
Town of Oregon.
Walzer here, LeBron,
Here.
Jernigan,
Here.
and that's it for us.
Town of Rutland. Sue Williams.
Here.
Jim Dorn.
Here.
Nancy Nedvig.
Here.
Mark Porter. Absent. The Village of Oregon.
Tim Higgins.
Here.
Tom Kirchdorfer.
Here.
Paige Knipford. She's absent. Lynn McDaniel. Here. Amanda Peterson.
Here.
And Phil Van Kampen.
Here.
Again, thank you all for being here tonight. We're excited to share with you the work that we've been doing for the past 9 months. The last time I was in a room like this with so many decision-making people, it was a family reunion.
I guess that's one way to look at it.
You're right.
Business. Review the 2025 budget current performance comparison. Chief.
So, Commission, Town Board, Village Board, you can see in the packet that was provided to you, it's 2A, just a comparison of a snapshot that Lisa and John has provided from our accounting group here at the village, basically showing you the first 6 months. And we're shooting in roughly right around the 50%, in some areas a little bit lower than 50%. We're probably on the operations side, we're probably, expenditures about looking about 40.2%. So we're doing actually fairly well through the first 6 months of the year. Nothing is broke, no large projects that I am aware of at this point. So we should be in pretty good shape to, be status quo and hopefully be able to meet our achievements at the end of the year without going over any current budgets, like we've done for the last 9 years.
Any questions? All right, move on to item B. Review the draft of the 2026 district budget and capital improvement plan. Chief, take it away.
So, there's a lot of different low-hanging fruit here. And the first thing that I will tell you is that this is a draft, and this is a very, very rough draft. Mr. Shanks and myself have been meeting, and when I say Mr. Shanks, I'm talking about Martin, the village administrator. We've been working on the draft, and we've been looking at the impact of everyone's municipalities with, some of the decisions that we've had last year with the CIP and that stuff, and the DOR, calculations and what we went through last year, and how that all came out at the end where they thought we were, breaking the law and everything else with our limitations per se. They gave us that exception and all that kind of stuff. We are here today to basically say that we understand that we believe, I'll put it this way because there's probably a lot of people watching tonight, we believe that there's going to be a fix probably coming to us in mid-August is what we've been told, or early September. That's going to give us the exception to use those base numbers from last year to roll them forward this year. And as Kathy knows from the town of Dunn and others, Jenna from the town of Oregon, we are going to again budget with the purpose of using our max with our levy and then borrowing, taking whatever we need, any differences from our fund balances money to make it work, and then we move forward and we go from there. So everything that we have right now is basically a snapshot. I believe, Lisa Novinska, if I can call on you, I believe our healthcare numbers are probably not, we got a percentage, but not an exact number yet. Fair statement?
Yes.
So those things will be tweaking. I know we got some numbers in just lately with our workers' comp, with our buildings and our overall insurance packages and stuff like that. That's going to be tweaked probably a little bit more yet, probably up a couple $1,000s here or there. But ultimately, this is a real good snapshot that I gave the commission the last couple months here now. that we've been kind of working at, and the direction that the commission is with your representations at that commission level is basically to go that direction and use the CIP and that stuff, and then use some fund balance money accordingly and moving it forward for the budget purpose. Not in talking about anything on the CIP at this point, Ken. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Updates on where the commission is in the future fire station building project.
You want to go back to that CIP just a little bit?
All right,
So I'd like to go back to that CIP. So what, the CIP is a 10-year snapshot that I gave the commission back this June, probably in, May and June, we were kind of looking at it, trying to get it back to 10 years. There's a lot of unknowns at this point, as we are all aware with our station projects, which is one of the large ones, of course, the aerial device that's part of that, whenever this project happens, that kind of stuff. There are some things out there in 28, 29, and in probably the 30 category that there's just a lot of unknowns, and I really could not get our arms around that yet to know exactly when these purchases are going to be made or have a good idea. So some of that has to be formed, and I have to be given some direction from the commission and or our municipalities moving forward so that we really have a good snapshot of that. We have in there, I think it's in 28, I believe, is when we've got the, actually 27, we got the $12 million in for the station. For whatever it was, those some numbers that were in there originally way back when and that kind of stuff for whatever station remodelings and or new buildings that we'd be looking at. Some of that stuff is going to be moving around, and of course then you got these ladders, and you're thinking about $1 million or $1.3 million for ladders. Today, if we ordered a ladder today at $1.3 million, it's going to be 3 years before we get a ladder, because that's how long the purchases are out. So there are some things that we know that are kind of like combined or really close to each other that have to be broken out and all that kind of stuff. That stuff will have to all float out as this fire station talk moves forward and all that kind of stuff, because it really probably doesn't make sense buying vehicles when you don't have places to put them and that kind of thing. So just a lot of common sense and business decisions moving forward, and that's basically how we've been looking at operating the district for at least the last 9 years since I've been here. That's almost to the date.
when did you come up with that $12 million number for the building for
Oh,
2027?
that's been a while ago. I'd have to look back. We'd have to pull back some of our other CIPs. The last time we did it, probably, it's probably been, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe more.
Okay.
I'm just guessing right now, Kent. I can't remember.
Do you think today, as we look at our budget come September, should that number be closer to 16?
I can tell you that number, just with everything that's going on, and we got professionals in the room that can give me a better fix on that number or where that number is going to be, but that number is definitely going to be north of $12 million.
Okay.
In my opinion today, it's going to be north of that number, meaning that we're going to be in the, again, $16 million is probably not out of the question. I don't really know what the village is looking at a senior center, but I think you probably got 15 million in that, maybe, something like that. That's correct, Martin? 15, 16 million. So yes, yeah, you're probably looking at in the $16 million category quite easily. Stephen?
We know in the past the ladder truck has always been kind of a lightning rod issue, and it gets put in here, and I'm just wondering, has there been a conscious decision to include that, or is this a wish list, or is this what the commission now has decided, or have we had an open discussion about that, or
Maybe
you could help
not,
me?
maybe not at this level, but at the commission level, and that ladder has been in there for at least probably a couple CIPs now. And it always has been a lightning rod per se, and there's been a lot of discussion about the use of a ladder, not only in in the municipal setting of the Village of Oregon per se, but also how that it's implemented out in townships and all that kind of stuff. And again, you're looking at we all know how the funding mechanisms work and all that kind of stuff. At that same time, I always remind people, I remind the village reps, and a lot of them are different today, but over my tenure now of the 9 years, we've bought tenders I know they're not $1 million, but they're a couple $100,000. We've bought brush trucks, we've bought water rescue equipment, different things, again, for the fire district that kind of makes this operation whole. And at some point, shape, and form, one of the biggest things that probably the fire district did, my predecessors is what I'm trying to say, how long ago it was that they used to have an aerial here and they put that out of service, financial restraints, that kind of stuff, the restraints of not having enough room to put it in a facility, all that kind of stuff, is basically with the limitations, so they went away from that. And it's been quite some time from the folks that I have talked to here that this district has one in station, and we've used the other people from the outside. Of course, when you look at the ISO ratings, when I'm talking the insurance group ratings and that kind of stuff, it's always looking at points for insurance rates for the businesses, where's the biggest impact, a little bit on the residential side, and then of course just the rescues within the 5 miles of an aerial, basically out where it's housed out at that location. So it is not on the wish list. It is basically something that sooner or later this area is going to have to put an aerial in and make happen, and that'd be part of this, our fire suppression plan for the fire district.
Tom, you're on the building commission,
For the senior center.
or for the senior. Do they have any 4-story buildings in the village right now?
I believe the Elliott apartments are 4-story over on Wolf Street.
And when does an aerial become needed or necessary?
Anytime we start looking at like 3 or more floors, three or more floors. And of course, buildings are still sprinklered and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people, again, not to get totally hung up on that aerial tonight and that kind of stuff, I understand that in expense and adding a bay for it in a station and all that other kind of stuff that goes with it. It's one of those things that a aerial brings a whole complement of extra ladders and ground ladders that be able to get to second and 3rd-story buildings and all that kind of stuff. Our limitations today, 24-foot extension ladders is basically what we have. All of our, anything over 24 feet, we are currently relying on all of the outside resources to be able to bring any ladders or complements to be able to get in wherever we need. So I get that, I understand that, and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that I can add to this to help you a little bit, Steve, is of course we have been known to make some purchases of good used apparatus on that market if we can find that, and wherever we can try to make the fire district solvent and make it whole for the future, I would assume we would be looking at that. And there again, it's just about the availability and finding something on the market. Hopefully a person can be able to do that.
Okay. I mean, obviously it plays into the space needs and this whole
It
comprehensive.
definitely adds a bay in an operation. There's no doubt about it.
All right.
Yeah.
And it's probably more of a demand in the village area than it would be, say, in townships.
Probably so, and it's interesting, because anytime I feel like I'm in a courtroom sometimes because people are like saying, hey, can you lean to this side, can you lean to that side? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we have in that station until somebody needs it. If somebody's hanging in a haymow and we can't get up to the haymow and we got to wait for somebody that we have to bring an aerial in to ladder something or get in, it'd be nice to have that device there right now. Or if it's something, God forbid, that happens down on Jefferson Street on a 3rd floor building where we need an aerial and our first crew is there and somebody's hanging out, the sprinklers are going off inside their house and their only way to get out is that deck and get down, they're going to really wish that aerial was there. They didn't have to stay on that porch and encounter any smoke. So there are just some limitations that we don't have today that we have to wait from the outside that just brings all this together. And someday, as Tim LeBrant knows, we're going to be getting our new ISO ratings, and it's going to clearly, again, show that the only place we can move for points is going to be basically in an aerial device. So everything else, we've pretty well maxed out on training and that kind of stuff. So
You keep talking about bringing in an aerial from outside. Which departments have aerials that we
So
end up having to use?
around here,
I'll show you specifically.
Tim actually has that. He did some work on that, but basically everything to the north or to the east or west of us. So
Stoughton, Fitchburg, Verona.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So excellent. But that's pretty much where it is. And At some point, I'd like to lay this all out, and depending on how the next, weeks and months go, we'll try to get this capital outlay plan, some of those other subsequent years built in and get those numbers moved out so that everybody can do, good planning, per se. Make sense? Excellent, thank you.
All right, I'm going to stand for this part of the presentation just because I'm more comfortable speaking standing. I'm Tim Higgins, Village of Oregon trustee and vice chair of the commission. So at the meeting last year, the commission made a promise that we'd be accountable for the money we were spending on a consultant to come in and help us start doing this space needs analysis, and that's a big part of what I'm here to talk about tonight. I want to make clear right at the beginning, we've made no decisions. We're not ready to make a recommendation yet on what to do as far as the project going forward. What we want to do is show you what we've gotten to at this point, what we've learned, what we know, what we still don't know, and then kind of give you an assignment all to go back to your respective municipalities and have some conversation and help sort of shape the direction of the next steps with this project, okay? So we're really kind of looking from a feedback standpoint tonight, just what are the things that really hit you hard, but if we want to dig too deep, we're probably going to spend a lot more time than we intend to tonight. So maybe keep the questions kind of high level, keep the discussion high level, and then if you want to go back into more depth within your groups, and come back in September and have a deeper conversation, if that's fair. All right? So this was Glenn's first day on the job.
Exactly. I like it. I like it. Bubblegum out of my mouth.
And in 2022, this is what we looked like then. We've been in this building for about 20, 25 years. A lot has changed since then. But let's go back to when we hired Chief Linsmeyer. He came in first as a consultant and then was hired as the chief. And the mission he was given was to transform the fire district, right? It was exclusively volunteer at that point. We wanted to move to a staffed fire station, okay? We wanted to have people on staff, not waiting to come from work and home. We wanted a much more organized approach to apparatus. The previous fire chief had gone many years without buying any equipment. And so some of the equipment was old. And the problem you run into there is you wind up having to replace 3 pieces in 1 year. It's very expensive. And it makes more sense to look at what is the useful life of a vehicle and plan for its obsolescence, plan the replacement before it's starting to cost you maintenance work, okay? Then also improve the recruitment and retention of staff within the department through training, HR, facility improvements, and also start looking at the safety of the first responders. And that's a theme I'm going to come back to a lot tonight, okay? The mission of the fire district, first and foremost, protect property and lives, all right? That's the number one thing. Number 2 is we don't have an unlimited budget. We have to do it with fiscal responsibility. The third critical mission of the fire district is the protection of the men and women in the building, many of whom are sitting back here. And again, I'm going to call your attention to that because I think that's an area we're not doing as good of a job as the first 2, as of today, okay? Just an idea of what it looks like when a firefighter comes out from a fire. There is a lot there to look at. And a firefighter needs to decontaminate after a fire. And we don't have what I would consider current best practices for them to do that at our fire station today, right? The second part of this is they go home to their families. And what are they bringing home to those families on their person, on their clothing? What are they bringing into their family washing machine, into their family kitchen when they wash their hands, okay? So those are some things we're going to come back to a couple of times tonight. So let's look at our progress. We now have 8 full-time firefighters. We have a station that is fully staffed at all times, 24/7. We have an apparatus replacement schedule that we've been implementing for the last several years, and we have at least a conceptual plan going forward for the future, and training is greatly expanded. just an idea of training hours year by year. As I mentioned, Linsmeyer started in 2016 and 17, and we've increased our training hours to over 10,000 last year. Okay? We're serving a dramatically increased population. This is the population of the village and the 3 towns in here, and that's your trend line. Admittedly, the towns, I used the full population of each of the 3 towns because I don't know how to break out just the portion that the district serves. But just, I think the key point is we have an increasing population. That increase is accelerating in recent years and projects to continue to increase. We also have an aging population. This is Dane County stats, but a little more than a decade ago, 10% of the population was over 65, and a few years ago that was already up to 15. It's projected to be at 20% within the next few years. That particularly affects the EMS service. Okay, that's where you get a lot more calls. And we've seen calls for service. And what you can see is fire is generally leveling off. There's really 2 primary reasons for that. The number one is we no longer send a fire truck on an ambulance call. I think the city of Madison still does that, where you'll see an ambulance and a fire truck. We just send an ambulance. It's a redundant process that we've just stopped doing. Also, I think fire safety has improved, sprinklers have improved, and there are probably fewer fires nationwide today, building fires, than there were 10 years ago. Okay? Personnel costs are obviously going up. And our capital outlay, well, we'd like to see this a little bit more stable, but the fact is some of the apparatus is pretty expensive. And so when you replace certain items, it's going to make that spike a little bit. So here I did a comparison of the other fire districts in Dane County, and I kind of narrowed it down on the next slide to just kind of some that are a little bit more in our population range, okay? So I know this is a really busy slide, but a couple things I'll bring to your attention is how many of them have, sorry, I didn't put the header on here, but this is ladder truck here. So who has a ladder truck and who doesn't? Basically, in our peer group, everybody has a ladder truck, we don't. One piece of information that we determined as we were doing this study was that when a ladder truck from another community responds to a fire in the Oregon Fire District, they arrive on average 12.5 minutes later than our people arrive. What happens in 12.5 minutes in a fire, chief?
Fire doubles pretty fast.
Yeah, doubles in every 60 seconds a fire doubles, so 12.5 minutes. Now that's not to say no firefighting is happening in that 12.5 minutes, obviously. But if, to the scenario the chief was talking about before, where somebody's waiting to be rescued at height, 12.5 minutes is going to feel like an eternity. Can we go back? Sorry. The other kind of measurement I was trying to find, see, when we started this process, some of us on the commission had this notion that there would be a standard for if your community is X population or X square miles, your fire station needs to be this many square feet and you need to have exactly this list of apparatus. And everybody we talked to was like, yeah, that'd be great if that existed, but it doesn't. And I kind of insisted, and I was a little bit stubborn about it, and it doesn't exist. And in fact, pulling together some of this data, it wasn't really easy to get some of these numbers out of some of the neighboring fire departments. We have a lot of information on the village website and on the fire district website that really lays out a lot of what we do. Not everybody in Dane County does that. And so it's challenging. But the one measurement I tried to look at is the staffing per 1,000 population. And Oregon at 1.82, I think is definitely competitive to the others in the area. Brooklyn, you know, they're much smaller, so it's kind of hard for that ratio. But definitely in range for the ones that are more of kind of our population. Cottage Grove, I'm not as sure about the numbers there. Their website just didn't have a ton of information. So the conclusion I drew from this is that we're reasonably efficient with our current setting in terms of serving the population with the staffing and the money we're spending, okay? This is ISO. You heard the chief talk about that. We're waiting for our next rating. We're 4 right now. Lower numbers are better. We're 4. If you can go back one, you can just see what some of the others are. ISO, we're probably about average, maybe slightly better than average for our peer group. Madison's a 1, I think. Okay, you can go back to the chart there. A lot of what's on there are, fire hydrant flow and testing. That isn't 100% on the fire district. Is the water available to fight a fire? Is more of a village and township issue. The dispatch is really a Dane County kind of thing. But some of the things we can do are the personnel and the type of service and trucks we have. Okay? And that ISO rating affects the insurance rates that are applied to residences and commercial businesses within the fire district. So it affects everybody within the district in terms of the insurance rate. By how much? I really had hoped to have a number there that says you go from a 4 to a 3, it lowers your insurance by 10%, but if you've dealt with insurance companies, you know they're not really transparent about how they do their finances. So we have a lot of options as we look at what we're doing now. Can we change the existing facility? Can we expand the existing facility? Do we need multiple facilities? Do we need a whole new facility? And if we're doing a new facility, do we want 1 or do we want 2? Do we want a main station and a satellite station? And so that's kind of where we're at now, is we haven't made any decisions here. But what we know is, we know that we've outgrown the existing facility. Laura's going to show you some numbers that kind of lay out specifically from a square foot standpoint where we think the gap is between what we have and what we feel like we need. 2, we know that our first draft of the expanded facility that we think would be perfect will not fit on the piece of property we currently occupy. Okay? We've got about 1/3 of an acre, and our draft was closer to 3 acres. And that includes room to maneuver. One of the wrinkles that'll come in with the ladder truck when we get to making that decision is you have to be able to park it. It's probably got to be a pull-through. You're not going to want to back a ladder truck into a bay. But you also have to have a turning radius for it. And so at some point, a ladder truck parking, even on the existing footprint, is going to be a challenge for some of the parking downtown. So, but we also know that the downtown location provides service to the district better than any other single location we found. And again, Laura's going to expand on that a little bit. Okay. So then the timing considerations. Martin always likes to say the best time to build anything is right now, because tomorrow and next year it's going to be more expensive. Okay, it's going to go up. Cost is going to go up. Again, I'm going to come back to the health and safety of our personnel that are working in that building. That's something that I think needs to be prioritized in terms of making improvements in that area in the short term. The equipment schedule is all part of the fire station as well, because as I mentioned, it doesn't fit in the current building, and it's very challenging to bring it through downtown right now. Okay, we all have debt capacity issues. We're taking on in the village a major project for the senior center. Adding this on top of it immediately is probably not going to work, just because we're going to hit up against some limits. If we're talking about additional space, we got to figure out where, and then we got to figure out how to acquire that property. And then we've had a little bit of conversation about consolidation. I think that's been floating around the fire industry for years. Can you consolidate? You've got all these fire departments in all these towns. Doesn't it seem like there's a redundancy, and could we consolidate it? But the conclusion we've kind of come back to is that you still need firefighters, EMS professionals, and their equipment within 4 minutes of the incident. So even if you find consolidation, you're still going to need that fire station. And what are you going to consolidate? You can consolidate things like administrative functions. You can consolidate things like maybe some training exercises and things like that. But I don't know that you can really say, oh, there's a fire station in Verona that's going to serve Fitchburg, Oregon, and Verona and Brooklyn. It's just not going to be fast enough. Okay? And the other issue is these are all really interdependent issues. And so if we don't know how many stations we're going to have, we can't really talk about cost yet. If we don't know where they are, we also can't talk about cost, which means we can't talk about timing, which means we can't really talk about what kind of equipment we're putting in it. So it's a decision that in some ways needs to all be made at the same time. And Kent is going to ask you to kind of take this information and take some questions back to your own municipalities and kind of wrestle with some of these key questions, and then come back next time and we'll have a deeper dive on that. So what questions can I answer from what I covered tonight?
You did that good.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Very good job.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nicely done.
So next I'd like to introduce Laura Eisnagel, architect, associate principal of Windows and 5 Bugles. And Jim, I'm sorry, I don't know your...
Schmidt.
I don't, you too. I don't...
Yeah, I'll do that. That's okay.
No worries.
Awesome. All right. So my name is Laura Eisnagel, as Ken said. I'm an architect for Wendell and 5 Bugles Company. We'll talk a little bit about Wendell and 5 Bugles in 1 second. Couple of quick things to know about me is fire and EMS and emergency services design is my passion. I absolutely love this job. I love what I do. This is all I do. So sometimes because of that, I get super excited and I talk really fast. So if that happens, raise your hand and I'll slow down. I'm going to let Jim do his own intro.
Jim Schmidt, I'm a retired fire chief. I have over 40 years of fire and EMS experience. I've been on your side of the table for 3 fire stations and regional training center. I've been interim chief for volunteer combination departments post-retirement from 31 years of a career service. I have been fortunate to be working with Wendell 5 Bugles Design for the past 9 years. I have about 80 projects that I've worked on over the past 9 years, and that pales into comparison to what Laura has. So we have a lot of experience, but still active in the fire service, especially on the training side. And appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this evening.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've had a better introduction
I
than we
was
just
going to say
had from
that,
Tim.
yeah.
So,
Tim, thank you
yeah,
for
that
that.
was,
I like leaned
way
over
to set it
to
up,
Jim and I was
so
like, isn't that a great
appreciate
intro?
that.
Like, this is awesome.
That's the condensed version.
All right, so the next slide. So real quick, so Wendell Companies is a national architectural firm. We're based out of Western New York. Jim and I come out of Eau Claire. Next slide. So 5 Bugles Design, that's who we are. So we are a niche service within Wendell that all we do is emergency services facilities. Our group has been judges for fire station design award competitions. We speak at national events. We speak at local events. We write papers for different publications that influence the fire community. So we would consider ourselves to be experts. I'm going to let Jim, is there anything else I missed on
No,
that?
you pretty much did it all right there. That was my entire thunder. No, I'm
Oh,
just
sorry.
kidding. No, we do have a lot of experience. That's really what this slide is intended to showcase, is that we have over 35 awards that we've won for fire station designs all over the country. And again, Laura has a significant amount of experience nationally as well, but again, state organizations, Minnesota State Fire Chiefs, Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs, multiple organizations throughout the country. We've had the opportunity from presenting on things like the latest trends and trends and features within fire stations to a lot of different articles and presentations about firefighter health and safety. That is something that we're very, very passionate about. And that's one of the ways I get to give back to the fire service as an old retired guy, to continue to help improve each community one fire station at a time.
So here's what we're going to go over tonight. We realize you've already been sitting for an hour, so we are going to take a little break about halfway through, let you guys walk around, go to the bathroom, and then we'll come back and rejoin to finish it up. So we're going to talk first about your existing conditions, then we'll talk about space needs, what do we need a new station, then we'll talk about station location, where should it go, whatever tests and what has our analysis told us, and then a concept design. And again, what we have to realize is that we're very early in this process. No decisions have been made, like Tim said. We're just starting to chip off the iceberg. This is an update. So when we very first came together as a group, the very first kickoff meeting, when we're introducing ourselves, what we did is we started saying, hey, what is your goal? If we can narrow this down, and any decision that we make, we can come back to a goal and say, does it meet our goals? What are our goals that we're trying to make? And as a group, these are the 6 things that we said. And actually, we started off with 3. And throughout the course of the project, we actually added more as we learned more as a group. So public safety was the number 1 thing that this group decided was our number 1 goal of this project. We want our people to be safe. We want to make sure our EMS and our firefighters are well trained. And we want to make sure that this is an inclusive facility that everyone can be welcome at and can come to. We have to protect our first responders. That was number 2. We felt like it was part of public safety, so at one point we had it under number 1, and we felt that was so important it should actually be its own goal. So we wanted to make sure that we really kind of pay attention. There are 3 primary ways that our firefighters are injured or cause deaths within our industry. They are cancer, suicide, and heart attacks. How can we make sure that we can do everything possible to help prevent some of those work-related injuries and deaths? Next is longevity. We really want to make sure that we think about what your needs are now, where is this community going in the future, and how can we make sure that we are doing the best possible with our current knowledge to make sure 2, 3, 5 years from now you don't say, that was a really dumb place to put that station, we should have moved it over here. Really think that through. The other thing that Tim touched on is, does that mean it's 1 station or 2 stations? And perhaps it's 1 station now, but where should that second station be? And does that first station still make sense? Fiscally responsible. Again, that kind of goes with that longevity. We want to make sure that we are being great stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. Are we making sure that what we are doing is an absolute need, or was it a want? Unite. This was a big one. We talked a lot about this. We wanted to be a part of the community and also to be our own community, to be a community as one. And then last but not least, the station should be in concert with the village's long-term plan. So whatever we do, we want to make sure that it makes sense for the village of Oregon and for the surrounding communities that this station would serve. So existing conditions. When we go into a building to determine whether it can be renovated or it should be raised or how we should work with it, we walk through the facility, we reviewed your floor plans. Your department gave us an excellent backup. I think we got like 4 boxes of plans and 3 boxes of papers and specifications in every single pay app from the last building project. I've never gotten such a thorough package. We did interviews with your staff members. We kind of walked around, talked to them, see what worked for them, what concerns that they have. We consider the code, so the International Building Code. We consider the International Existing Building Code. We consider ADA compliance, so America's Disability Act. We consider the NFPA, so that's the National Fire Protection Association. And then we also consider the needs of contemporary firefighters, just making sure that we, again, keep our responders safe. When we are looking at any sort of existing facility, the other thing we really want to think about is, can it be renovated? Where would you go in the meantime? Is the property large enough? How would it be phased? What are the costs compared to building new? So we really want to make sure that when we make a recommendation at the end of the day, there's been no stone left unturned. We've really considered all of the options. So these are common deficiencies that we see in a lot of stations. Not all of these happen at your station, but just kind of reviewing them real quick. So often they are undersized. Our apparatus has grown tremendously over the last 20, 50 years. A lot of times, so again, the doors, apparatuses simply don't fit in some of the older stations. They're too big. Often we don't have personal decontamination areas. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. We don't have proper storage for our gear that we wear, our personal protection equipment. They aren't designed for multiple genders. Often when these stations were built, again, this is not the case for yours, but men were the only responders that we had. Well, suddenly we have more than just men. So we have to make sure that we can accommodate them. Dorm rooms. A lot of our stations have turned from a volunteer station to a career department, just like yours. You might have not have dorms. Obviously, you guys do. Lack of visual and audible privacy, exercise spaces, and then it doesn't meet current code or current ADA compliance. Again, these are common deficiencies. We'll dive into your building now. So as Tim said, we're located on this tiny little site here in downtown. It's 0.3 acres. The original construction of this portion here was in 1966, and then this portion here was built in 2002. It is incredibly landlocked. So we have an alley with a really thriving little downtown right here. We have a nice big parking lot for that downtown here, and we have a road on this side and the old village hall here. So essentially, if we do want to consider this facility, something has to give, right? So those are things that we start looking at right away. We can't build the size of the station we need on 1/3 of an acre. It's just too small. So in a nutshell, portions of your building are in worse condition than others, obviously, because some of it's very old and some of it's generally new. But if that building were built today, it would not meet the current code, it would not meet the current ADA compliance, it does not meet the current NFPA recommendations. And then again, because there are two different ages of the building, some of the finishes are in worse condition than others. Some areas look very nice, some areas just need some work because they're a lot older. The biggest thing that we see though is that it's undersized. And it's not that the whole thing is undersized, it's very specific areas that are undersized. And we'll kind of talk through some of those things in the next couple slides here. So in terms of some of the things that we see when we walked around, there's a lot of water damage, a lot of drainage issues that we have on the outside of the facility, both how the water is being shed off the building and how the water is settling around the building. It's causing some challenges there. So that's a couple different things. Damaged stucco is caused because of it. We have infiltration of the stair tower because of that. We have aging overhead doors with limited visibility. So if you could see through this photo, you could see that you can't see through the glass to see what's on the outside. And this is your downtown. We want to make sure we keep people safe. On the inside, we have a lot of things going on here. This is a difficult picture to see, but basically you have these trip hazards where concrete is settling a couple inch, half inch, 3/4 of an inch. When you have that settlement and people are walking with purpose to an incident, that's a very dangerous scenario. We don't want to see anything like that. And again, even though your more recent building was constructed in 2002, we've actually undergone a new ADA since then. So even the ADA portions of that building are no longer ADA compliant for today's standards. Oh, I'm sorry, there was one more on that last slide. No, I did point to you and then I thought right as I did it. So dorm walls. Your dorms originally were set up for 2 people in one dorm, and then during COVID, because obviously we were trying to stop the spread, we built walls in between. When those walls were built, the way that it was done no longer meets code either. So there are some definite concerns we want to do. So our key challenges in this facility when we come through and see it is that our training is woefully undersized. Our apparatus bays are also undersized, especially your older bays. We don't have the proper flow for personal decontamination. You do have a decontamination space. I'll show you a photo in a second. But it doesn't really meet what the NFPA recommends for current fire stations. You have a lot of admin space, and it's right-sized, but the way that it's laid out is incredibly inefficient. So people are kind of popping back and forth, and there's no connectivity. There's not like a real sense of community and connectivity there. Our living spaces are about as far away from our apparatus space as you can possibly be. And there are only 2 things that we can control when we're designing stations: where it goes, and how do we get our responders from point A to point B. So really we want those dorm rooms nice and close to the bays to make sure that they can get to the response as fast as possible. There's an overall lack of security. So if you've been in the station, you'll know that often some of the doors are either propped open or just the way that it kind of works through. Any visitor can get through large portions of the facility, and we'd rather have them be able to stop. We don't want them out on the apparatus bay floors. It's not safe for them. We don't have station alerting, which again, we could update your current facility to have that, but we don't have it currently. And then last but not least, we don't have any like mental health spaces or quiet spaces. When we constructed all these facilities, we had no idea the trauma and the impact that it was having on our responders. And now we understand that and we appreciate that more, so now we focus on those spaces in our new facilities. So, space needs. I'm going to stop talking and let Jim talk.
So what we looked at is basically one of the first major steps to kind of lay the foundation for the project, figuratively speaking, is we looked at all the different spaces that are in a modern, fully functional fire station today. And we looked at and very purposefully gone through the different spaces within the station and tried to determine what the square footage, how large they should be. For example, if we're sitting in a classroom, how many people do you want at a table? 2 people at a table in chairs, and those types of things. And we determine what you currently have now in your fire department and what other departments have. We also did tours around it so that the staff can get an idea on what could work with, for them, and to kind of compare and contrast to the programming dimensions that were provided during our programming session, and to what they may be seeing in another fire station in another community someplace. So we're able to come up with understanding or looking at different analysis and a different way to get the big picture to give us a square footage of what this could look like. And then obviously that device, or that tool, excuse me, is extremely important when we're looking to, as Laura said, you're not only trying to overcome the challenges that you have today in your facility, but you're looking to the future and see what that could look like as well. So all that was part of this discussion. It was actually about a 3-hour programming session, so it was quite lengthy. But yeah, and again, to know, and that where I get to come in, especially the programming is where I get the lead and we get to do collectively, and actually as a group we did collectively. It's extremely important to not only find out where you are now, but where you could be to meet or exceed the expectations of the people that you protect and serve.
Yeah, so one other thing about this, and Jim can probably touch base on it a bit more too, is this document that we come up with for our programming, we've been adapting and creating and working on this program for over a decade, for what, 15 years?
At least.
And every time we go to a new community, someone brings up a new thing, or we see something new and we put it in there and we have a discussion, we bring it to the table for the next time. So we had a lot of those conversations, and we were always adding things in like, oh, have you guys heard of this? Have you thought of that? Do you need this? So it's kind of a living, breathing document. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and Laura mentioned too a little bit in the beginning about the NFPA standards, and we talk a little bit about the standards. And we know in 2017 the NFPA was petitioned to have a standard to determine specifically what a fire station should look like, the different spaces within a fire station. That petition was denied in large part because there are a lot of different codes that either directly or indirectly identify what a fire station should look like and what the spaces should look like. Like Laura mentioned, the apparatus size. There's a standard that's in the NFPA that says specifically an engine shall have X number of equipment, these specific types of equipment on that engine. So consequently, directly or indirectly, the apparatus bay has to be large enough to facilitate that type of apparatus and the equipment that's being carried on as well.
So, long story longer, at the end of the day, these are the square footages that were determined at the end of that programming session. Now, if we go to the next slide, you can see where you are. So like I said, some of your spaces are right size. You have the right space. Whether or not they function great is a different story, but the biggest differences are kind of here at the top. So your apparatus bays are woefully undersized. Your apparatus support is, I don't want to say it's non-existent, but it's incredibly small. We'll show you some photos if you haven't been through the station in recent time. Your training room is also incredibly small. There's a reason we couldn't do this meeting at that station right now. We wouldn't have space for it. But your admin is perfectly sized, again, but does it function? Your living quarters is nearly right sized, but does it function? And then last but not least, your electrical rooms. I've got some great pictures I'll show you in a minute here. So I'm going to try and go through some of these photos a little faster just to condense this, because I don't think you all want to be here till midnight. But this is your existing station. So these are some photos of things that when we walk through, we're like, really tight spaces. These are really difficult areas for our responders to get through. We're walking with purpose. We're trying to get to response areas. We need things clean, clear, so we can get through. We got places to be. This situation here, I have not seen them back this apparatus in, but I can imagine that they have several backers telling them when to stop, and they have to probably be within inches because you don't have any clearance. Doors. We don't want to ever have our doors hit one another, lining them up to park perfectly. There are marks on the ground where we have to make sure our wheels stop, so that way we don't bump doors when we open them and get in and out. Again, we really want to make sure we have proper clearances in our apparatus bays. So the next slide is showing you some images of what we would typically see in apparatus bay today. So here's some things that right away, so making sure our ceilings are tall enough that we can do maintenance on and in our apparatus. Can we tip a cab? Can we do the maintenance that we need to do? Can we go on top to make sure that they are safe? How are our trench drains located to make sure that our responders can walk through the space safely? How are we doing our ventilation? So we always have a belt and suspender system. So you have the code required system, and then we have our additional systems such as the ClimaVent. You all have ClimaVent now, so you're doing a great job in that sense. Making sure that we have bright spaces so you can actually see. If you're doing maintenance, if you're doing inspections, we don't want shadows. We want to make sure that we can see what's going on. In-floor radiant heat is sometimes done so that way we can make sure that if water, or when water gets on the floor, it can dry quickly. Natural light. Support only when needed. We don't want a lot of columns in our spaces because, again, we want to keep things clear so we can get through. But those columns do often provide a lot of support, like water, air, gas if we need it. So there's different supports that would come through these different areas. Last but not least, I'll draw your attention to this one here. There are also training opportunities within this facility that we could do that we don't have the ability to do now. So if we do have a new apparatus bay, these are things that we would be, talking through with your department. Do you want to consider internal training? Next one.
As far as training, I'd like to add too is that there's a saying in the fire service, I'm sure it's applicable to most emergency services, fire and EMS, that you train like your life depends upon it, because it does. Not only yours, but also the people you're trying to protect as well. So having those low-cost, high-opportunity training areas within the fire station is a kind of a no-brainer in many respects, and very affordable to have that type of feature inside.
All right, so like I mentioned, you basically don't have decontamination. You do. This is what you have. So we have our extractors over here, our dryer, we have a sink. This space is located, you can't really see, but this door here leads out to one of your apparatus bays. The challenges that we have here is that it doesn't meet the right flow. It's not ventilated the proper way, so anything that is cleaned in there, it gets clean, but all those carcinogens just go right back on. We don't have a lot of space. There's no areas to lay out our gear and equipment to make sure that we do inspections. If we need to do any maintenance on our gear, there's no place to do it. In a contemporary fire station, what we would like to see, again, is countertops so we can actually do gear inspections on. Scullery sinks that are deep enough to actually clean our equipment. We prefer not to see this type of ventilation. If we could for drying, we'd prefer to see a cabinet-style dryer so that anything that is dried off, all of those carcinogens can be directly vented outside. And then making sure that we have our boot sinks. You don't see an image here, but we'd have a boot sink to make sure that we can also do some gross decon in these areas. Again, the other thing that you'll see is you have space. We just want to make sure that our responders can get through. You might have a call, and then you might have another call that comes in, and you can only get 2 or 3 sets of gear into one of those extractors at a time, depending on the size of your extractor, so that other gear stacks up. Where do we put it? Off of your current decon room, this is your shower. This is your one and only decon shower. It has a single curtain that goes across here, and then it kind of tucks back and through. I'm just going to skip to the next one, because this is what more of the decon showers look like now, where we actually have a door that you can shut and lock to make sure that someone can stay out and they know it's busy, or they know it's in use. All genders can use it, so if we have a shift of all women, a shift of all men, or some mix therein, we don't have to worry about that. And then we also have lockers, so you can have a set of clean clothes on the outside, grab your clean clothes, go in there, clean up, and then come back out. Jim, do you want to talk about shower within the hour?
Yeah, there are several standards, and we'll talk a little bit more about cancer prevention, why it's important. But one of the standards that Laura just mentioned is the national standard that you shower within an hour. And obviously when we talk about programming, we talk about the number of showers you need. It's directly related to the number of people you have on your department, or the number of people that are going to be going inside of an interior attack in a fire suppression situation. So that's just one of the many standards that are out there. That's a standard that we try to design into, and certainly something that we've included in most every station that we've, I think, ever designed. But I can talk about this one if you'd like.
I have one more thing to add on that. So
Yeah.
Tim had shown that photo of that responder that came out of the fire and they were covered in that black soot.
Oh, yeah.
There was a really interesting video that NFPA put out 2-3 years ago, where they put they sprinkled like this dust, I'll call it, on a responder in full PPE, and then told them just to go throughout the day. And basically what it was a powder that you couldn't see, but under a black light you could see it. So they went throughout the day like they normally would. They came into the station, they what do you call it, degowned it,
doffed.
They
Took off
doffed-
their PPE.
They doffed their gear.
Yes.
They took their shower, they put their clothes in the wash machine, they walked through, they drove home, they played catch with their kid, they went to bed that night. And the next day then, the NFPA went through with a black light to see everything that they touched, and that dust was on absolutely every single thing. And the most heartbreaking thing was the little kid playing the catch with the ball. When they throw the ball back and forth, the little kid like catches the ball in their face, and all of that soot was all over the kid's face. And those are the things that we're trying to prevent by having a proper decontamination. We really want to make sure that we get our responders clean.
Numerous carcinogens and a rumen contents fire.
Yeah, okay. We beat that one.
Yes, we did.
Sorry, I get really passionate.
Yeah, PPE, showing you what you do now as far as storage of your PPE. This is inconsistent with NFPA 1851, I believe it is. So this is something that you do now, and something that you need to do.
Is on the next slide.
Yep. This is having a separate area, and this is the apparatus support areas, as we call it. That section of the fire station, so it's off of the apparatus bay in a separate room with separate ventilation, and a process prior to that to actually keep it clean, to get the firefighter clean and then keep the PPE itself clean as well. So.
Yeah, and one bonus about putting your gear inside the facility is also that it's not exposed to UV light, and UV light breaks down this really expensive gear faster. So if we can get it in an internal space where there's no light, it's even better.
Yep.
Bonus. All right, this is awesome. So this is your watch room. You have responders that are on duty, and this is where they sit. It's in this tiny little closet in between your two bays. This is your front reception desk here. I feel like they're self-explanatory. You're incredibly tight. Today, what we try and do for our responders is have our watch room so that they can see what's going on. We would like them to be able to see the front of the front apron to make sure that there's nothing going on, understand what's going on in their community. We would like them to be able to see into their apparatus bays to see if there's anything out there that needs their attention. And then we also often have them sized so when shifts are changing, both shifts can get together, or at the beginning or end of a shift, you can have a debrief. What happened last shift? How does it work? If we need small trainings, we can do that. So this is more what we would like to see, is something a bit bigger than the shoebox that we have right now. I don't actually have a picture of your training room, I realized, but it is rather small. So what we would prefer to have in a department, and what we talked about with your department, is having a training room that actually fits your group. And I can't recall off the top of my head what your full roster is. Do you know, Glenn?
They're like 49, I think you were talking about.
Yeah,
You're
49.
not
Yeah,
getting
so,
half of it.
yeah, right now you can't get them all in there. So just making sure that we have a proper training space so we can get them there all together at once.
Yeah, something that we didn't really mention in the beginning, and I think that we need to mention, is that the spaces that we're showing and the features that we're showing you of a modern, fully functional fire station today, it doesn't matter if you're a volunteer, career, or combination fire department. These are the spaces, these are the types of spaces you need inside of a fire station today to make it fully functional.
All right, so the next one, this is showing your exercise room. You do have an exercise room, which is a major bonus. There are a couple things we would like to see changed. First of all, it's directly above your training room. So we have been in training when your responders were upstairs lifting, or we've been in meetings when people are upstairs lifting, and you can hear the weights hitting the ground, you can hear the pounding. If you can go back just one more second. The other thing that makes me incredibly nervous is that we don't have any clearance around your equipment. It's incredibly unsafe. So if we go to a new one, what we would try to do is make sure that you have clearances that are proper clearances around your equipment. And again, floor space, because sometimes you want to do something that's not just equipment-based. Perhaps you want to stretch, so maybe you should have some space in the center, or do other types of training. Next one. All right, so this, Jim, when I put this slide together, Jim didn't even know what I was showing, and I was like, this is what I'm showing. I'm showing your mechanicals that are tucked away inside of other spaces. You don't really have a true mechanical room. It doesn't meet code, and it's just not safe. So going to the next slide then, we would really like to see equipment that actually can be serviced, that we can actually get around our equipment and make sure that we can get to it to maintain it. We want to see that we prefer to have a water service tucked away so that Glenn doesn't get a call at 12 in the morning when the ambulance goes out and the Plano vent comes back and hits the water service and sets off the sprinkler system. True story, that happened at your station.
Multiple times.
So
We know it works.
it works.
And just to clarify, we said Plano vent twice now. Basically what that is, that's a direct exhaust capture on an apparatus. It's a hose that connects up to the the exhaust itself. And when a fire call comes in or EMS call comes in on a diesel vehicle, it automatically disconnects and goes back as you can drive out. So as you back in, you're supposed to connect it, before you get in the station. Again, to minimize the exposure to carbon monoxide.
Yeah, and it's like, that's a name brand, so it's like Kleenex. There's a whole
Correct.
bunch of different brands, support one or the other. They're all great. This is a great mechanical room. So a mechanical room, or not a mechanical room, I'm sorry, a workshop. So yours are combined right now. We'd really like to see those services separately. Your responders do a lot of their own maintenance. They do maintenance on their equipment and on the apparatus themselves, so making sure that we have some space to do that is what's recommended. So, questions so far? Yeah.
So one numbers early on, you suggested 37,000 square feet is a footprint. Is that the current need or is that the anticipated growth need?
That's a combination of both. So that's looking to see if we were, and we'll kind of talk about concepts in a second and like how those kind of change throughout, that square footage might change throughout the course of this process. But what that was recommending is if they got what they were looking for the next 5 to 10 years, and I would say probably a little bit beyond, because we thought through like your org chart and how you're going to grow for admin. We thought through how you're going to grow for personnel and your internship program. So yes, it's now and future.
You said 5 to 10 years.
Oh, I would say it's at least, I would say it was going to be a lot more than that.
You're talking the whole station?
Yeah, the whole station.
37,000 square feet.
Yeah, I would say it's like 50 years, but we can't look that far in the
Yeah,
future.
it's
So
roughly 50 years is
Yeah.
the thing
Yeah.
we're looking
that's
at.
the goal.
Yeah, and to answer your question there, Tom, is basically what I think you're asking is, that 37,000 square feet that she's got in this programming is what the computer system is recommending from what the information they had and that kind of stuff. And then you can see where our current numbers are, and then how this is all gonna float out. That's not necessarily
It's not.
a 37,000 square foot fire station.
No.
Is not what we're asking for by any means.
No.
That's the high number, and it actually comes down
We
from
hope
that.
that comes out.
There's more
The other
information.
thing, the other thing to consider too is typically when you build a fire station, it's not often added onto, because if it is added onto, it's because you're growing and you're having more services. And typically, when you're growing and having more services, Tim touched on this, and we'll get to this in a second, your response times have to be maintained, so it typically means we need a second location. So obviously I don't have a crystal ball, but we try our best to make sure that we don't have to add on to this facility, but that we're not oversizing it so much either. It's kind of this nice little balance.
Yeah, I believe in the contract, program will be developed that details existing and protected space needs for the next 20 years.
Yeah, so we
That's
thought,
what we originally agreed on.
yeah, we thought through like their staffing and how it was gonna change, but I mean,
If
Again.
if done correctly, it can last a whole lot longer
Yeah.
than 20 years.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we really hope that that's what we strive to do.
Reg?
Yeah, oops. We have one.
Sorry, I just have a really quick question. When we talk about increasing spaces, in terms of maintaining those spaces, are we also getting in, I know that the personnel do a lot of work within the building to keep it clean and ready to go, but in terms of, adding more showers, adding more of those spaces, do we also get an estimate of what it looks like to maintain those new spaces?
So we don't provide that service.
Okay.
If we wanted to, we could reach out, and Glenn and Jim both have an arsenal of other chiefs that they could ask about
Okay.
that. Typically though, we see that our stations are maintained by the firefighters themselves.
Okay.
The one thing I would recommend, and this is for any building and your home, is to consider doing deferred maintenance, just allowances, just making sure that, understanding like if we build a brick building, 25 years from now, you're still probably gonna need a new roof. 50 years from now, you're going to need to tuck point, you're going to need to replace caulking, you might need to replace windows, so kind of anticipating some of those needs. But those are just givens, that's just the nature of the beast.
Right. Okay, thank you.
But it's also important to realize on a day-to-day basis, they're lighting twice as much space,
Right.
heating twice as much
Yes.
space, et cetera.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because, and again, your station's a little different because you're split with the older section and then the newer section. A lot of our departments, so we ask them for what their monthly costs are in their old station, and even though they are getting a significantly larger station, their rates have gone down significantly, and I'm gonna have Jim talk about that, because his was dramatic.
Yeah, I can give you a real example. The fire station, the central fire station, we built, we went from a 12,500 square foot fire station to a 33,000 square foot fire station. And we did a comparison because we had ownership, kept ownership of the old station for about 6 months to a year, trying to sell it and different things like that. So we did a comparison because the new energy efficiency, and this was a gold LEED certified fire station, the first gold LEED certified fire station in the state of Wisconsin. To be fair, Madison had a platinum. So it was highly efficient. So what we want to do is kind of compare and contrast between the energy costs, specifically natural gas, between maintaining the old 12,500 square foot fire station for the months of November, December, January, and February. And we compared and contrasted to the new fire station, and it costs more to keep that at 55 degrees than it was to maintain that 33,000 square foot. So the natural gas costs were less expensive because of the energy efficiencies that were designed into that new station.
Yeah.
So yes, you're bigger, more cost, but if you do it right, you certainly can have some energy efficiency designed in as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that that's like the norm, but we
Yeah.
have asked a lot of our departments to track that for us, just for curiosity's sake. And it's very often the case that even though they are growing in space, their bills have either remained the same or gone down. Because, you know, you've switched out the old type of lighting to LED lighting and all the other efficiencies that we might have. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, say, the floor sinking around the drain, what have you.
Yeah.
And have you talked about, or did you investigate the building itself structurally? I mean, the walls, the roof, just the shell of the building, what shape it's in, or its life expectancy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so the older area, so I'm not a structural engineer, so I did not like look at the structural calcs. The older area though is showing visible signs of, some visible signs that it is, I don't want to say it's like, I guess I would say it's in poor condition. The newer portion is still in fairly good condition. The newer portion could definitely be renovated, but that older portion I would recommend raising that space. The other thing to consider too is we did have our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers do the same. I forgot to mention that. They wrote their report, however, we just recently found out this week that Wisconsin is adopting the new code, and it has a major impact on MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And so I need them to actually rewrite theirs once we find out what this new code is. I didn't bring that tonight, but we'll have more information again for you in September when we come back for the next update. We did look at that. The other thing to consider too, and I know you didn't really ask about this, but I'm gonna just elaborate for one more quick second, is often people come to us and they say, well, why do you need such a robust structure for fire stations? And the reason is that we do have to hold any emergency service facility to a higher level of structure than we would a different building, like say this building here. We'd have to be a different category for structural strength. So your existing apparatus base, the older base, would definitely not meet that. There's no doubt in my mind. And even your new area, we'd have to investigate if we were to update that facility, and we'd have to bring that up to the current category 4 structure, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
All right, time for a stretch?
Yeah, we'll give
Yes.
you like 6, 7 minutes, 5?
5.
5? Okay, timer?
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Take a stretch.
Break time.
I like it.
Silent moment.
All right, everybody ready to begin again? Okay, now we get to the fun part. Where should we put your station? All right, so first slide.
And why it needs to be where it needs to be. We talk about response time, and we ask somebody on the street, what does response time, when we talk about the fire department or emergency service, medical services, what does that mean to you? Well, usually they're going to say, well, the time it takes to get from the fire station to the call. That's 1/3 of it. Actually, when we talk about it as defined by the NFPA, is that response time has 3 different parts to it. It's the call processing time, dispatch. The call goes in dispatch, they take the call, and they dispatch it to the fire department. So call processing starts when the tone goes off on the pager or on the alerting system, and then from the time it takes to get out of the fire station onto the apparatus is the turnout time. And then the actual travel time is the last third of that. So in a study like this, and when we talk about fire stations, we talk a little bit about adjacencies and those types of things. That would affect the turnout time. The time it takes a firefighter, the folks back here, to get anywhere from that building to the apparatus they're assigned to, that's the turnout time. So we do what we can to minimize that because of the adjacencies. If we have to go up, we put a pole right next to the apparatus, right next to their apparatus when they come down. So that's something that we can affect. Dispatch time, obviously, or travel time is most basically affected by where is the fire station located. And there are different standards that identify what that needs to be. So that's what we're going to look at. And a standard for turnout time is anywhere from 60 to 80 seconds, typically about 60 seconds to get, for fire call, it's 80 seconds. For EMS call, it's 60 seconds. That's the standard. Most departments shoot for 1 minute. The time the tone goes off on your pager or inside the fire station, we want you on the apparatus in 60 seconds. And then travel time is obviously going to be variable, but the goal is,
Next slide.
as the next slide will indicate, the NFPA 1710 identifies for fire calls, the standard is for 1710 that you have 4 personnel or a first due engine company on scene within 4 minutes 90% of the time. For EMS, the standard is 4 minutes for having a first arriving BLS unit, basic life support, with a defibrillator within 4 minutes 90% of the time. So 4 minutes is a key characteristic that you'll see, or a common theme you'll see as we go through the next slides. On the left there, it identifies why that's so important. If you've taken a CPR class in the past 20 and 30 years, you've all heard the data for EMS that if the heart stops, irreversible brain damage will occur within 4 to 6 minutes. So you need to get to a defibrillator, get to an ALS unit with a defibrillator within 4 minutes. Fire call, we just talked about a little bit briefly. I think Tim identified that a fire can double within every 60 seconds in size. So getting there very, very quickly with the fire apparatus and fire personnel is also extremely important, especially if it's your fire or your emergency. You want them there as quick as you can. And 4 minutes is the expectation of the general public as well, to get them there as quick as you can. Right?
Excellent. So essentially, this is your district. So this is how we start off our process, just looking to see where you are. What you can see here is the different lines of Dunn County, Rutland, and the town of Oregon, and then here is the village of Oregon, and everything in this pale pink color is your response area. When we start looking at GIS, what we do is we map out all these little dots all across your area, and we figure out how long it takes you to get there. We consider property ownership when we're looking at all of the different properties. We consider contours. Is it hilly? Is it flat? Railroads, streams or rivers, wetlands, anything to do with FEMA, and then adjacent properties. Unique to yours, you also have, as you all know, 3 towns and a village. You have a fast-growing population, so it's kind of a moving target. Where are we growing? How are we growing? And then you have automatic aid with your surrounding departments. So I'm going to have Jim touch base real quick on the difference between automatic aid and mutual aid, because that is an important factor here for your response specifically.
Yeah, and I would like to also, maybe before they even, Tim mentioned also too that there's talk about regionalization of fire departments and fire protection areas and whatnot. But from my perspective, you've already taken that step. You are a fire district. There are a lot of communities that can learn a lot from what you're doing right here in the Oregon Fire District. So you're already doing that to a degree. So the next step, though, is even a fire district or some collective type of, or collaborative type of effort for fire suppression still has a time when they need help. If you're a combination department like you are here, you don't always have the number of people that you need to have or should have per the NFPA standards to actually mitigate and suppress and rescue and do everything else that the fire department is expected to do. So then what consequently happens is, like you did here, is you have automatic aid. These are governmental agreements that automatically get dispatched for certain types of emergencies, whatever it's considered in your automatic aid agreement. So it's more of an area-specific, communities that are adjacent to each other is kind of the automatic aid perspective. You also have mutual aid. I believe it's 115 Division Mavis in Dane County. So if there's an incident that gets really large and you have a larger incident, you certainly have the opportunity to draw in different resources, personnel, apparatus, etc., to help mitigate and suppress the fire that way. So that's really the basic, kind of a local thing for auto aid, automatic aid, and more of a regional, perhaps a county opportunity for mutual aid.
So the reason that we bring that up is because the automatic aid does help your department quite a bit, and we'll show you that in the response maps in just one second. But essentially, when we looked through this, what we did is we looked at 7 different properties. When we very first select the properties, we do not pay attention to size. We pick a property, and then we figure out where we can perhaps do a station in that area. So I want to make that very clear. It's strictly based on numbers. It just says this exact point is the best spot we have. So we looked at 11 different areas. We looked at your existing station as the baseline. We had some properties that were given to us by certain members of your commission, and then others were generated by our program, by the GIS program, and what the program said was the best. We ran these scenarios in different ways. So we ran them originally without your automatic aid to see what your department can get to and cover without anybody else's help. Then we did them all with your automatic aid because that's actually what's going to happen. We also considered 1 station and 2 station scenarios. And for fun, we said, hey, what would it take to cover your entire district in a 4-minute response time? And you do not want to know how many stations it would take. So we're going to stick to 1 and 2. And then, like I said, you have a huge district, and it's rather weird shaped, and it's really hard to get to certain areas. So because of that, we looked at your data in 2 different areas. We looked at response time to your district as a whole, and then we also looked at your response time to your actual incident locations, where your responders actually go into calls. All that make sense? Okay, so next slide. So here are 2 different maps that are telling us very same and very different items. This one over here is showing little dots for every single one of your calls that your responders responded to in 2023, 24, and 25. What's really hard to tell when you get into here is where are the places that they're going all the time. And that's when we go to this one. This is our heat map. And you can start to see that there are some key areas where your responders are responding to regularly. There are certain things that trigger those often, so senior living, hospitals. This is your downtown. There's a lot of corridor there of a lot of traffic. The intersection down here of 138 and 14. So there's a lot going on there, and then again, coming up this direction, senior living, a lot of roadways that come through a busy road. So those are your primary drivers and why we see those 3 different areas. So again, baseline, your existing property, we kind of touched base on this before, incredibly small. It's 0.3 acres, but it does have some positives. You already own the land. It has excellent response times, which we'll see in just 1 minute. It's not in a floodplain, which is great news. And it's in the downtown. And again, when we talked in the very beginning about what goals were for your department, that community connectivity was really important to them. So that was a really, it's a good thing for us right now. Negatives, really small, really landlocked. And, we talk about this parking lot to the north here, and one thing to let everyone know about in case you don't know is that there's a huge storm drain underneath there. So it's like a 72-inch storm line that goes underneath there. So if we were to move and expand over top of that area, we would really have to put some focus on how we would deal with that. Can it be done? Probably, but we'd have to really pay attention to that. So next slide. Essentially what you see here are a couple different things. There's two different maps. This is your coverage to your current station. What we want to do is we want to keep your department in those darker green colors. So everything that's within this village, you have excellent response time from your existing facility in the village of Oregon. The challenge that you have is that when you go further south, you wouldn't get there by just your station. But you see that there's this green down here that gets a little darker, and again, green up in Dunn that you wouldn't expect. That's because of your mutual aid. Auto aid. Sorry. Auto aid. That's because you're auto aid. Thank you. Said that backwards. So it's really important to note that you are definitely benefiting from that auto aid. Down here then is the calls to your actual incidents. So we really want to look at them in two different ways. As Jim mentioned, that goal is to get to 4 minutes within 90% within 4 minutes. So here's your statistics. When we look at the district boundary, you get to about 8% within that 4-minute mark. When we look at your incident calls, you get to about 63% in that 4 minutes. That's pretty good for one station for a district of your size.
Keeping in mind, the standard is 90%.
Standard is 90%,
But
but that's really not bad compared to what we've seen. So this was a PowerPoint. This was going to flash up second, but Tim already mentioned it anyway, so it doesn't matter. When we did the GIS and said, GIS machine, figure out what's the best property, they picked one within blocks of your current station. So what that's telling us is that for your current calls, for the calls we've had for your past 3 years, your downtown is a great place for your station to be. When we said, GIS machine, tell us where to put 2 stations, what did it do? It kept one in downtown, and then it moved one out just south of Highway 133 and 14, close to, I can never remember.
138 and Hill Road.
Hill Road, thank you. 138 and Hill Road.
133 is close to Hill Road.
Sorry.
14.
Dang.
14 and Hill.
14 and Hill. 14 and Hill. Oh, there we go. Got so many of them. Love these folks though. So when we started looking at this, one thing that our group determined is, my parents are actually from about 20 miles south of here. So as soon as I saw that location, I was like, well, that's where the accident's going to be. That's where we want to respond to. So we really don't like that location, actually, but we'd want to, if we did 2 stations, that's where the GIS is telling us it would go. So again, by doing those 2 stations now, our district boundary jumped up to 17%, so it had a 9% increase, and our total incident calls went up to 72%. So that's a pretty good, those are decent numbers. Like I said, I like getting closer to that 90%. Is it feasible with 2 stations? Nope. And again, we'd take a lot to get there. I'm sorry, Jim, what were you going to say?
no, I was just gonna, I hit the 90% thing, I emphasize the 90%, but I can tell you that a lot of communities, you are not alone in the challenge of trying to meet the 90%, especially when you're looking at the size of your district and the configuration of your district as well. There's a challenge for most every community across the country, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I've had one. All of the years we've been doing GIS, I've had one department that was a perfect square. That was amazing. Okay, next one. So basically, when we look between 1 station and 2 stations, you can see how we have increased. So we have a total increase of about 9% and 8.5% for incidents if we went from 1 station to 2 stations. And the next slide is going to say, we have no conclusions at this point. And this is one of the things that we are going to have you all go back to your boards and your councils and talk to them about, is whether or not, if you can go to the next slide, please, thank you, is a squeeze worth a lemon, if you can say it in that way, is having the cost and operational costs and the building maintenance costs and the personnel costs and all of that for 2 stations worth that 8%? That's not for me to answer, that's for you all to answer. We don't have a conclusion yet at this point, but these are the things that we're going to want you all to think about and discuss as a group, and then we'll come back together. So with that, we're going to move on to the next part, which is conceptual design. So again, when we very first started this process, we started the GIS, we started looking at the programming, we figured out what we needed, we put together a concept, and immediately all we've talked about so far was the site. So these concepts have not been reviewed by the department, They are not ready by any stretch of the imagination. They're a jumping off point for us to start having a conversation, but we wanted to give you an idea of what we were looking at. So when we start with the concept design, what are we trying to do? Oh, yeah.
Right before we do that, I just want to make one other point about the utilization slides we've been looking at. It's further complicated by the fact that you probably saw those heat maps and where those, where the three hottest points are. I think we can all understand, especially those in the village, there's Sienna Crest, Oregon Manor, and Beehive, okay? And those are private organizations that change. Oregon Manor is a very good example of that. So we want to be careful that we don't make plans for a village fire station around a business that could very well pick up and move someplace else. It could really screw up where a site is located. So that's one thing. Secondly, when we talk about calls, we're talking about total calls, right?
Fire and EMS.
Fire and EMS. So it's important to reflect back on the data that Tim went through to understand that what percentage, on average, are EMS calls versus fire calls.
It's usually 2 to 3.
Yes.
Or, two-thirds, one-third.
Right. So let's say 2/3 of those calls are EMS calls and 1/3 of them are fire calls. So it is further complicated by those factors, those hotspots and how those can change, and the fact that we're talking about total calls here, and 2/3 of those are made up by EMS and 1/3 of our fire. So we have to fold that into the decision-making process as well.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pause because we do want to go to, we really wanted to get through the concept so we can understand what we're looking
That's all I
at
wanted
before
to
we
say.
start talking about site. So
Sure.
we'll hold the rest of your questions. I'm so sorry, Phil. Just write it down. If you need a pen, I'll give you one. Okay, so basically when we start talking through concepts and start trying to figure out what we're drawing, we are not in full design yet. We are working with, I would call it a napkin sketch, a bubble diagram. What we are trying to figure out is, do the adjacencies work? Are the right spaces coming through? Do the flows through the station work properly? Do we have all the spaces we need, or did we miss something? We went on those tours. Did you see something there that you decided, hey, you know, we don't need that, or hey, we do need that? How does that work? Every color then represents a department or a space type. And then when you get your actual report, when this is all said and done, they will be in the appendix. I forgot to take that out. Obviously, we don't have a report yet because it's not written yet because it's not done yet. But they'll be coming in the end. So
And all the things that you just mentioned, again, directly affect the turnout time. Again, the adjacencies, et cetera, so.
all right, so at the very beginning of this, we kind of talked about that there are 3 different things that really cause a lot of harm to our responders. And those are the things that we really try and focus on when we are doing the fire stations. Response time is paramount, but then taking care of our responders has to be right there with it. Because if they are not safe, you are not safe. So these are the 3 things that I mentioned that cause numbers 1, 2, and 3 cause of firefighter deaths. Wow, that was hard for me to say. So what we try and do then is put spaces within our facility to help that, to reduce those factors. So for cardiac arrest, making sure that we have fitness spaces for our responders. Our station alerting mechanism has changed dramatically over the years. It used to just be a bell that would go off or a siren or something that would alert you. Now we have systems that we can have lights that come on gradually so you can wake up and get through in a calmer manner. They can have watches that will vibrate on their wrist for a more gentle wake up to kind of help their heart as much as possible. And then response lighting controls. So if you are on the EMS team and going out 2 and 3 times as often as the firefighters, we can have it where just your dorm room goes off and the person next to you can stay and remain and sleep and rest and recover. So those are some things that we would like, as we start developing these plans, we really want to think through.
Yeah.
For-
sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say that suicides, I think we're averaging
Oh,
about.
yeah, I'm not even, I was going to go.
Oh,
down
go
fast.
ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Nope, jumping through. Okay,
Sorry.
so then cancer is the next one. So hot and cold zones. Tim mentioned to me that I forgot to talk to you about that process. So I told you all that I don't feel that you don't have an NFPA recommended decontamination zone. So what we do is we categorize a facility in hot and cold zones, and there's a transition zone that you come through. When we look at the concepts and further presentations, we'll elaborate on this quite a bit more. But what the NFPA recommends and what we try and do in all of our designs is that you come from the hot space, so from the apparatus bay, you come into the gear laundry where you doff your PPE and start your gross decon, unless you've already done that at the station. But either way, you bring your gear into a space and you start to wash that. While that is washing, you go through the next phase then, where you wash your person. You wash yourself off to make sure you get anything off of you that you can. And then you take your clothing that was underneath your PPE and wash that. All of that remains in a closed circle that's all directly vented to the outside to make sure that we can keep our responders as clean as possible to help try and reduce that cancer risk. The other thing is keeping that gear off of the apparatus bay. So when it's done with that cleaning in the gear laundry, we want to have a direct connection to the gear lockers, put all your gear in there, and again, keep it off your bay. Keep us from getting that cancer. And finally, the suicide rates are incredibly alarming for our responders. So what we try and do is we try to have the spaces be as homey and welcoming as possible to make sure that they can have a space that they feel comfortable in and that they can relax and try and get some rest. Decompression areas, and again, that fitness room, you'll see that that's on here twice because that's an incredibly important space.
Yeah, I'm just going to summarize all three of those in a little more detail. On the suicide, National Fallen Firefighters Association identifies that we're losing about 100 firefighters a year through suicide. Cancer and cardiac arrest is such a serious problem in the country that in the state of Wisconsin and many other states across the country, there are cancer and heart disease presumption laws that mean if a firefighter gets cancer or has heart disease, they don't have to go through a process to try to prove that it happened at work versus some other exposure or some other reason for getting that cancer. So it's well documented, well studied, and it's a very, very serious problem in the fire service.
Yeah. All right, so again, concepts. We have no idea where we're building this. What we wanted to do is see, with the spaces that we think we need right now, how big is this facility going to be? We said that it was at 37,000, and like I said, we're going to keep massaging that down to get to wherever it needs to be. But for right now, this is a generic site that we looked at to see how big does it have to be. Could this be made more condensed? Absolutely. Give us a site and then we'll figure out how to make it work. But essentially, there are a couple key things that we want to do on all of our stations. We want a safe response. We want an area that's separate from the public and that we have space for our apparatus to sit on the front apron, that we can do, we can pull an ambulance out or a piece of equipment out and make sure that we can see what's going on and safely turn both directions. We want a clear and distinct return, so that way when our responders come back, we're not having responders on here trying to reverse and back in as another engine is going out. We want to make sure that they are kept separate as much as possible. Meanwhile, we want our public away from that area. We do not want people driving and parking on or in front of our aprons. Keep them separate. We obviously will always have to consider some sort of water detention or retention. We could work that through in the future. And then, do we have room for training? What kind of training are we going to have? So these are the different types of things that we will consider when we start developing your site in concept. Next one. So again, just trying to understand, these concepts are so early on in the phase. This is probably not what it's going to look like, but it was just someplace for us to start. We'll start diving into them with the fire department once we understand where we're going to be building. But our initial blush at this is saying, hey, it would be really great if we would have a site large enough that we can put our admin, this yellow, and our community room off of a public area, and that we can keep it separate so that the public can come into the training room, perhaps use some toilet rooms, but not get into the rest of our station. We want to keep that private. We want to make sure that our apparatus here in the red is separate from the public spaces, like I mentioned. We want to make sure that if we do have two bays like you currently have, that our watchroom has connectivity to both so they can understand where everybody is at all times. We want to make sure that we have that proper decontamination process that we'll go through to make sure that our firefighters are clean and safe. And then we also want to make sure we have all of the support spaces that we need. Our SCBA, our self-contained breathing apparatus, we need to make sure we can clean it, that we can fill it, that we can maintain it. We need to make sure we have that workshop that we talked about. Do we have an opportunity that we could have training in a stair or in a tower? How are we going to be drying our hoses? So this is what we're looking at here. Again, the colors are just representing the different departments. This is so early on, that's as much detail as we'll go into today. For this particular one, what we were looking at when we started designing your station is that at 37,000 square feet, it is a large facility. And we really need to maintain those response times. It was one of the two things that we can control, right? So we wanted to get our dorms as close to the bays as possible and have access to the bays in as many manners as we can that makes it fiscally responsible. So we have to have 2 staircases per code, so we wanted to make sure that they got to the bays as quickly as possible. So that's how it's kind of laid out at this point. Again, this is so early on in the design process. We'll just move on to the next one. So basically what we have done is this is your programmed space. This is our concept space. You'll see some numbers start to fluctuate and start to adjust. And as we learn more about you and as we figure out what site we're going to be putting it on and develop these plans and really think through all of the different spaces, these numbers will continue to change and adjust. On the next slide, here's some examples of other facilities that we've done. This one's obviously Ohio. Those 2 are Wisconsin, or those 3 are Wisconsin. But you can see that where something programs at and where something ultimately ends up are often 2 different numbers. And we'll keep working with your department and with you all to make sure that whatever we end up with is what is right for your department. And with that, we can open up to questions. Did you have anything else, John?
No.
Okay. Yes.
Can we look at the map that showed the response times? I just had a question about, there's that stretch of the town of Dunn that just doesn't seem to have great response times.
This area here?
In either scenario with 1 or 2 stations, so, what happens there, Chief? Is that an
You don't
area
have any
where we get
roads.
automatic aid, or who responds there?
That's all automatic aid today, Kathy. Do you want to explain how it comes up on the GIS the way it does?
Yes, so what this is saying, so if you were to look really closely, and again, when we give you the full report, what you'll be able to look at is you'll be able to see where all the roads are. There aren't roads there. So that might be a marsh, it might be woods, it might be a field, yeah, so it's a marsh. That's why. So if you look at the roads that are directly around it, if you came up here and saw right here, the road and the road directly around it, all the houses that are actually serviced, that's in the green. It's just the marsh behind, there's no way to get to it. And in some of our departments, what is that? Oh,
Yeah,
over
she's
there.
zoom in there,
perfect.
so we can kind of take a look.
Yeah, see, there you go. In some of our departments, they've actually had us take areas like marshes out because it just sways the data. There's just no way to get in here.
But
But
we left
this
the
road-
mark,
Maybe
we
some
left
wetlands.
the marsh and the wetlands and all that kind of stuff, but the houses themselves are in the green, as you can tell.
So that area's green, that's where road is. Road that's green, road that's green, road that's green, road, green to yellow.
All right, I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah.
No,
It's a really good question.
That is a real good question.
That's an excellent question.
That's one of the things that I think that we looked at after my hire back in 16, and the commission and myself took the recommendations of making sure that we had a good response for that. I mean, I'll just go back. Saturday night, we had a call up on Beale Street, like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we had departments coming from Monona, from Fitchburg, ourselves, Stoughton, Verona. We had water coming different directions. Ultimately, it just ended up being some wires smoking in a wall and everything else. It worked out very well. But the response plan that we have for that and the way we made that work, just bringing a whole bunch of folks together. You know, a Fitchburg truck over at Station 3 is there for us within probably, 4 or 5 minutes from that location. And the Oregon truck shows up probably about another 4 minutes later. And the crew just works together, hands it off. In that particular case, there's no fire or that kind of stuff. And, people say at the end, how does this reciprocating automatic aid work? So for the city of Fitchburg, we're helping them out with the State Farm and everything close proximity down here where they can't get to that. Or the trailer park. We had an incident in the trailer park a few years ago, just north of Man's Pit up there, that we basically were there in there before the Fitchburg truck shows up. So the reciprocating efforts and where we have came with our fire and EMS is just tremendously working for everyone. At the end of the day, we're taking care of the people. And that's just not on a fire response, that's also on any of our EMS calls, on that kind of stuff. Any of our high acuity echo calls and that kind of thing, if someone is down at any location, Lake Wabisa or anything at the boat launch and having a heart attack or something that someone's doing CPR or that kind of thing, that's going to trigger one of our closest paramedic rigs, which could be any unit. It could be a city of Fitchburg, it could be Monona, it could be a city rig, anybody that's driving down Highway 14 at the time. that's gonna be responding to that. So we have came leaps and bounds with certain things to be able to help it work and make these districts work accordingly. So,
I would add too, if I could, Chief, that's not the situation all the way across the country. Again, we get all over the nation, and there's still a lot of turf wars and turf battles, and this is my response area, don't you dare respond to my area. But because of the forward thinking and the putting people first and property first, their personal property first, this is the type of cooperation that thankfully the fire service and the EMS, as well, has been embracing. Because it's not always been that way. I can tell you, when I first started, there was a lot of turf war. You'd never even think about Mavis or automatic aid. Wouldn't even be considered. But thankfully, for the greater good of the communities, it's common.
Yeah, I mean, we have one department that we're working with out in Connecticut that has 3 departments in the city, and they fight amongst each other.
Yeah, they go through one community to get to a call in the other part of the community,
Yeah.
which makes no sense.
Absolutely no sense. Yes.
Phil, you had one first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Phil. Yes, you're right.
Thanks. I was just going to add a little bit to Tim's point, and that is that the heat maps and the run times are based upon, unless this has changed, they're based upon historical data.
Yes.
That is, we have not input any information looking forward where the future population will be. And I think when we get a little closer to, actually deciding where and what we're going to build, we're going to want to incorporate in some way that information.
Yeah, so as an industry, that's not how, our program can't predict where it's gonna go.
Yes, I understand.
So if you were to say, hey, there's gonna be a thing here and we want you to put in the system that they're gonna have 50 calls, we can add the 50 calls in as incidents, but just keeping in mind, and you and I talked about this, but we'll tell the whole group, those are predictions, it's not actual. What we're showing you right now is actual.
Right.
And, it's kind of a moving target, and I know Jim's got some comments on that.
Yeah, I would just add that, to your point, we certainly asked that question somewhere in this conversation. You got to have the conversation that, okay, do you anticipate this area? Is there future plans? Union Grove comes in mind. There's a plan to have a significant new subdivision, and it's going to mean X number of private or secondary type of housing, multifamily and single family, different types of housing. So we have those conversations. So we try to predict as best we can with our GS, and we have that conversation. But like Laura said, you cannot predict the future. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't exclude like the red zone that we just talked about. Your response area is your response area.
Right.
We don't know, what we suspect that response area is not going to change. But what happens in those response areas, like potential future developments, we can't identify. But so you do the best you can with the information that you have.
Thank you.
Could you say again what the date range was for the actual data?
Yeah,
was it 3 years? Or?
Yeah, it was all of 2023, 24, and then half of 25.
Okay. Is that enough data? Is that a big enough sample size? Or?
Yeah, it typically is. If we had more, we could show more, but my hunch after all the years we've been doing this is it's going to show you the same thing unless there was something else that opened. So for example, like to Tim's point with, if there was a senior living center that was there and closed, then that might have swayed things.
Right.
But again, it's probably the same areas. So there are some areas that are just going to be hotspots. Downtowns are typically hotspots. There's a lot happening. Major interchanges, typically hotspot. There's a lot of accidents. Senior centers, typically there's a lot of action there. So there are typically spaces that are going to have a lot of action. So yes, 2 years is probably fine. We often do 2 years. Sometimes we've gone up to 4. It hasn't swayed the data that much.
Okay. Thanks.
You have a question?
Yeah, I have two. First of all, are any of these presentations going to be available for a group for us to discuss?
Yes.
Really to look
Yes.
at. Yeah, even, I understand it's all.
This presentation's not on the website yet of ours, but it will be after tonight.
Okay.
So that will be there, and there's a bunch of other subsequent information there already, and it should be working. Last I knew, it's working is what they tell me. The GIS and some other concepts meetings and anything else that's been done with Window up to date is already on our website.
Just remember that caveat. They have not approved or even looked at the plans.
Got it. And then the second thing is something, I just wanted clarification on something you guys talked about a couple times when you're talk about decontamination.
Yeah.
And venting it to the outside.
Yes.
does it go through like HEPA filters or something to capture those carcinogens, or are we just kind of venting it out to the neighbors? Like-
Yeah, so I would have to double check with our mechanical engineers, but my understanding is that you're venting out to the neighbors. The thing to keep in mind though is that you have so much more air out here, so those carcinogens are going to dilute quite a bit more than if they were in your small little space. What was it?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
it disperses into the atmosphere and it's not,
Yeah.
Are there
I think
capture
that-
systems though?
but there-
where we
Yeah, there
could-
probably are, yeah, there
HEPA
are,
filters?
yeah, and like I said, I would have to get a mechanical engineer here to talk smarter about
Okay.
that. I know building structures and like architecture and function, I don't know a lot about HEPA filters.
I'd be interested
I will
in
just,
knowing.
I will just add this today, and I don't want to cause any more grief for the village, myself, or anybody else in this room. But today's system, you know, we recognize some of the emissions and some of the issues that we had with some of the diesel trucks back in probably 16 when I came. It was kind of one of our highlighted areas. We were fortunate, I wrote for a federal grant, we got it, I think we put it in, Phil and Jeff, what year was that? Probably 17 or 18, we got that money from the feds, we put that in. It's vented out on the west side of our building, on the outside, between us and the businesses behind us, and it's going up in the air. So that's taking everything from the trucks today and going straight up. And I'm sure people have walked by and heard that fan running, but that's what it's there for. It runs for a capture moment when that truck is started until that truck is out, and probably 2 minutes afterward to make sure all those emissions are out of that living quarters per se, or that bay area that is, our station that we have today is so tight, it doesn't matter if it's the bay area or the living quarters, it's all tied together. I think we understand that. So we, just in general, the walls and everything else, by the little things that we've done so far, has tremendously helped in all of our risk reduction as far as cancer and all this carcinogens and all that kind of stuff, so.
Okay. Yeah, I just meant, because you used that particle dust example, and I thought, that's what I'm envisioning
I
going
know.
out, so I
Yeah.
just want us to be thinking about that.
Yeah, once you watch that video, you can never get it out of your head. It's really like that little boy there in Oliver's face.
It's
just-
more particulate stuff
Yeah.
I was, but,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Exactly. Lynn?
I just have a question about, I think something Tim said, or maybe I misheard. So we're obviously talking about square footage of the building. I'm wondering about the size of the site.
Yeah,
And I thought 3 acres was mentioned.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering, I am terrible at this sort of a thing, so I put it into Google, and 37,000 square feet is about 0.85 of an acre. So what are, like,
What's everything else?
yeah,
Great question. So everything else is, there's a lot. So
Okay.
Tim had mentioned, when you have a ladder, you can't just drive a ladder in and just park it anywhere. So you need all that turn radii to go around. So can you go back to your favorite slide?
yeah.
When you start looking, so basically there's a couple different areas that we have pavement. So we'd have a drive to get around to the back, and so if we, had access from another way, we could absolutely do this differently, but let's just use this for the sake of discussion. When we are driving our apparatus up, we need to make sure that that apparatus can come up, around, and turn into the facility. These apparatus, you've driven behind a semi-truck, you can see how it swings. It creates a lot of space. So we need a rather large back apron. The other thing that we can do on that back apron is that we can also have training. So we can do extrication training back there. And then we can also do hose testing. We can do different types of training. I'm not the trainer. You are the trainer.
Yeah, a multitude of different, I mean, it's really, it's only, it's entirely up to your imagination, it's really a low cost. Typically for training, like for the hose tower, that type of thing, we will put in confined space, trench, collapse, ropes rescue, ventilation, ladder training, just a variety of events that can be characterized as low frequency but high risk events. So that's the type of training that we typically design in there.
Yeah, so in this fictional concept plan that may or may not ever go anywhere, your training tower was back here. So what we would want is we would also want concrete specifically, not asphalt, around that space. So we can throw ladders up. We can do also training right around that area. So that's part of it. Then you have your front apron. So we want to make sure that we can get an entire apparatus out here. So again, when we are pulling out, we don't have to worry about that back end swinging and hitting your building. So we want to make sure that we can get an apparatus on your front apron. And then if it is in a downtown area or someplace with sidewalks, that it's also not stopping on a sidewalk. Because we don't want somebody to, be walking and have a chance of having interaction there. So those two aprons typically take up a lot of space.
Yeah. And that front apron should be large also because when you're responding emergently, you want plenty of time to be able to look left, right,
Yeah.
a couple of different times as well. So
Yeah.
plenty of space.
Yeah. Then what we need to have is we have to have parking. So if we have 8 responders on call, let's say there's 8 on duty, you need 16 spots, because at some point you're gonna have both shifts there where they're doing some sort of a change. They might have a debrief, it just might be a brief time period, but we wanna make sure that they can park. We also have your admin staff that won't be considered in those 8 responders. So depending on the size of your department, it could be 1 stall or it could be an additional 10, 12 stalls for your department. So we need to make sure we have a parking lot that can accommodate that. I did mention that we would love to have area for future training opportunities in addition to what we were talking about before. And then last but not least, all of the municipalities have some sort of a water retention. So any of the water that falls on your property, we have to be able to maintain and then distribute back out in an appropriate time. So we'd have to have some sort of water retention. So what this means is we typically would prefer a site that is at least 2.5 acres. If we could go up to 4 or 5 acres, it would be amazing. We do realize though that that's really hard to find in these developed communities. A lot of your folks came on tours with us. We took them to La Crosse Fire Station number 2. That particular station was built on 1 acre. And if you have an opportunity to go see it, you will see that it is shoehorned in there. It is very tight and it has 3 bays. Your department has a lot more bays. La Crosse has 5 stations, or 4 stations with plan for a 5th. That's how they can have a smaller apparatus bay. So for the amount, just like these areas here, that's all your bay. So yes, you're right that in theory it sounds like you only need 1 acre. It would be incredibly difficult. It would not be possible to get your apparatus on the property with the safety that we would prefer to have and that NFPA recommends on 1 acre. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there is an opportunity, you can see the response apron there. It's longer on that right side versus the left side. Typically, that area on the left side would be for smaller vehicles, so there's kind of an economy of scale there. Not every piece of apparatus has to have a drive-through. There are apparatus that can have perhaps ambulance bays, that type of thing, station vehicles.
Yeah.
That could be backed in, certainly provide opportunity for a little less space.
Yeah.
So we typically do that as well.
And the reason I keep saying that, we might never see this concept again is because we design every single station for its site and for the department. So again, I got to have a big generic square site, put on whatever you want to do and see how it works. It's probably not going to happen.
Doesn't work that way.
So this was just a fun little exercise for us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
All right, well, thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, sure, thank you. Appreciate everybody coming tonight, and I greatly appreciate your time, questions, and collaboration as we discuss it. Reaching agreement on our 2026 annual budget is much more straightforward than trying to address the long-term building project that we have here tonight. But we need your assistance. We put together 3 questions that the chief will hand out that we would like you to take back to your municipalities and discuss. Some of this is going to talk about the 2-station concept. Do we have a 2-station concept? So you have 2 sets of personnel, 2 buildings to maintain. Right now, this is not on the radar for the planning commission, but it's come up, and we think that you need to talk about it among your community. Our goal here again, one of our goals is to keep costs down. And a 2-station concept would literally double our cost of staff. We would like you to take a look at your budgets that you have. Chief and I spent some time with Martin yesterday and talked about the budget that the village has. And going forward, for the next couple of years, there probably isn't any room for that. But looking beyond that, things can start to work out. So I would like all of the townships to take a look at your budgets to see that you're going to be able to commit to something as we go out to 2027, 2028, 2029. Right? What number can we use? That's a great question.
Laura, the question is on these numbers. What would you, at these early stages of where we're at, and you'll see what we're looking at for a 32,000, not a 37,000 square foot station, but let's say a 32,000 square foot station. What do you think that in 3 years from now, what do you think Oregon Fire District is going to be looking at for just a ballpark? Again, I got a 12 million in there now, but realistically, where do you think this is going to be? Because I know you looked at some different things with the current station and probably remodel at that facility and stuff, but if you did something, what do you think is some real good, realistic numbers?
Yeah, so there are a couple things to consider. I'm going to stand back up because I'm talking when I stand. You're standing when I talk. So there are a couple things to consider when we talk about dollars. First, we have what we call the hard cost. So that's actually what does it cost to build a building. Then you have all the soft costs that go into it. So you have to, typically you have to pay an architect and an engineer to draw your plans. You have to do geotechnical exploration of the property to make sure what kind of soils we have. You have to have a site survey. You have to have furniture that goes into it. And the alerting system, we talked a little bit about the alerting system tonight. So all of those things, we call those our soft costs. So with the hard costs and the soft costs, that's our total project number. Currently what we are seeing in stations, and this is kind of across the board, is the hard cost, the cost of the construction, is anywhere between like $385 and $450 a square foot. The soft costs then typically can be another $100 to $150 a square foot. So if we were to budget, let's say $500 a square foot for 32,000, if I just did that math correctly, we're at 16 million. If we were to do, let's say 600, just for curiosity's sake, because I don't know where it's going to go in the next couple of years, then you'd be at 19. So somewhere in that 16 to 19 or $20 million range would probably be okay. Just want to keep in mind that historically, architectural building construction costs has gone up about 3.7%, with the exception of the past 5 years. The past 5 years, we saw construction inflation 19% one year, 18% another year. So it seems as though it's leveling back off again at that 3.7 inflation. So when I'm looking at estimates and probable costs, I'll use 4% to be safe. And when we do actually end up with concepts, we will give you an opinion of our probable costs and all of those different things that go in there, like I mentioned, that site survey, the geotech, AE fees, any professional fees you need, surveying, all that stuff will all be in it, and you'll get to that total project cost. Yes, ma'am?
So does that include cost of potentially buying the site?
Yeah, we would have that in there if we know what it was. Absolutely. Yep. And
What
soil
we've talked about
remediation.
so far does not. But what we've talked about,
No,
so the
no.
16 to 19
That does not. That does not include it.
that.
No, that's correct. Yep.
Oh, it does not?
It does not include it. No, this is just the development of the site and the property. 'Cause that's such a variable. Every community working is so different. The one thing to consider too, when we look at that opinion of probable cost, is if you do buy a piece of property, for example, that has a building on it, we will also look at what it costs to demolish that building and take care of any harmful things that might be inside of it, or hazardous things that might be inside of it. So any asbestos, any lead, or if there's any contaminants in the soil. So often fire departments are given these amazing free sites that were former mechanic shops or laundromats, or we had a brass refinery, a gas station. They have really awful soils. We can't keep those. So we have to pay to remove those soils. So we'll also look at that too as much as we can. Yes, sir.
How much land would be available for the downtown area, the fire department? They own so much now, but how much more could be accessible?
And I guess that's a question for the village and for you all. So that is one thing that whenever we start a project, we start asking the question like, is the property to the south available? Is the property to the east, the north, and the west? We go all around. And we literally start looking at each individual building. Could we use this? Could we use this? Could we use this? we do a test fit to see if it would even fit, see if a concept, the apparatus base, et cetera, would even fit on those given properties. And if it fits, if the department likes it, then we would have a conversation with the village to make sure it worked with their plan, and then the property owners to see if they'd even consider selling. So right now, I don't know. Right now, I know we have 1/3 of an acre that is ours to do with what we can, which is way too small.
Pretty small, short of 3 acres.
Yeah.
But it was worthwhile asking.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Something to think about.
It absolutely is. And you know, we've done it, we worked with the city of Janesville actually, where they were actually in a very similar scenario where their existing station was in the exact right spot. But the property was tiny and they really wanted to keep their old station because they thought it was really cool. So what we did was we actually purchased, and by we I mean the city of Janesville, purchased 10 different properties. We vacated a road and we built, we made one piece of property and we built it there. We've done that a couple of different times for a couple of different scenarios. City of La Crosse, you all toured Station 4 with us. For that one, we purchased 7 different properties, raised everything on there, and started with a new site for that.
Yeah, I would just add, the city of Marshfield is where I came from, where I spent 31 years. We did that for a new central fire station in Marshfield. We had willing sellers on one half of the block, willing sellers on the other half of the block, so we vacated a street that dead-ended anyways there. So we were able to get 2.4 versus 2.1 acres for a 33,000 square foot fire station. So there's ways to do that.
Yep.
We also approached it from a perspective, yes, what do we own currently in the village? What is an ownership in the county? What's an ownership of the state? What other pieces of property property owners willing to perhaps trade and do a trade for property that may not be maybe outside of the desired GIS location, but there's an opportunity. So you can certainly get creative and have opportunities once you start looking. But also once you start looking, the price of property could potentially go up as well.
Yeah. So be careful for that. Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned fast growth.
Yeah.
It was kind of evaluated with this, so I assume that would be mostly the village, but
I think
how do the towns figure in? Because like our population declines over time, so how does that growth factor, I guess, enter into the cost and the cost share between municipalities? Or any other towns growing?
So cost and cost share would probably be in your operating agreement.
That's all us, yes. So, Kent, you want to handle that, or?
I'd rather you do
that. Okay, so today's agreement that we have is that the cost sharing is the same no matter if it's a piece of apparatus or any fire apparatus, any ambulances, or any buildings. If that is something that our commission members would like to talk about and try to renegotiate or try to work out towards a facility, or for any of this large purchasing, that kind of thing, that would have to be brought up and have to be flushed out and worked through for all the members, is the PC way of saying that.
Yeah, what is the difference in growth? What growth numbers were we talking about for?
Yeah, and I guess
Village of Oregon, Phil, can you refresh my memory? Over the next, how many years are we looking at this village? I think it was like 10,000, help me folks?
Up to 5,000 by 2045. Yep.
Up to 10?
Up
Or
5,000.
5,000 up to 45
And
in the next 20 years?
in my opinion,
Yeah.
most of that will be west and potentially south of the village.
Yeah.
So 5,000 population growth in 20 years?
Yeah.
And what would the population be at that point then?
17,000,
17.
based upon 12,000 today.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Laura.
thanks.
So, did you pass these out?
I did.
So in front of you, there's 3 things that we would like you to take back to your boards, and if you could put them on your agenda for this August. We would like to get your input about moving forward with the needs for a new station. The need is there. The decontamination units that we have today is minimal compared to what they should be. The men and women that work there are at much higher risk. Response times are incredibly important. As I sat with Joe, we were in a restaurant setting. Joe goes down with a convulsion, and for some reason, I went to him and sat with him on speakerphone with 911. It took 17 minutes for the EMT to show up. When you're sitting there, again, I have no training. This is brand new to me, my first experience. That's a long time. 2 minutes is a long time. Or when a car on Glenway gets T-boned, and the person who was your friend, I didn't know what happened at the time, is in the car with their neck broken. Civilians show up, want to help. Thankfully, one of the civilians said, no, don't touch him, don't move him. And within a short period of time, EMS was there to extract her with a broken neck. And today, she's fantastic. So, response times are incredibly important. Services are incredibly important. I want you to go back to your municipalities to take a look at how can this fit in with your budgets going forward over the next 3 to 6 years, and how can we make this work. We have a lot of work on the commission to do, and we're at the beginning stages of all of this. Any other questions? Tim?
Kent, where are we at with the initial proposal from our consultants? Where are we at in that stage? Are we at the end of that engagement, or are we in the middle of that engagement?
Jeff, you want to answer that, or Laura?
We are in the middle.
Middle.
Yeah, so,
Middle.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so it broke down into existing facility assessment, the GIS concepts, opinion of probable cost, and then a report. We've done the existing facility assessment, and we have that report typed up. It's not quite done yet, but it's basically done. So I'd say that one's probably like 95%. GIS is done unless you need anything else. So that portion is there. Concepts haven't started. And then opinion of probable cost has to come after that.
Okay.
And Laura, of the 29,000, where are we invoicing right now?
You know, Jeff, that is a wonderful question. If Robbie was here, I'd make him answer that one. I just design buildings. I don't pay attention to invoices. So I cannot answer that. I'm sorry.
I don't have the computer in front of me. Lisa's got one. She's not logged in anymore, though. For Wendell, I'm going to say we probably have paid around, just off the cuff, I'm going to say probably around $10,000 of the $29,000.
So we're right in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question. Let's say we all, at some point in the next few years, we borrow the money, or, we can all do that. Like, it's not a problem so much, except for your debt capacity, we can borrow the money. My concern is operational, because that's what we can't borrow for. So let's say we build a new fire station. Is there anything about having that brand new fire station and brand new equipment that would necessitate an immediate need for an operational increase of like hiring more people?
If we go to a two-station model, most definitely.
Yes, but if we were to stick with, I guess I'm envisioning a one-station model, right?
And to be fair to everyone, is like, so far the commission has always told me we are sticking with a one-station version. Our staffing plans, and what I'm saying, our staffing plans. Next year at this time, for our 27 outlay, I should say outlay, for our 27 operational, we're looking at hiring 2 additional 2496 personnel at about 90-some thousand or $100,000 a person. And that's, again, in our staffing plan to continue to move forward. And some people said, why did, Fire Chief, why did you propose this to us a few years ago in the staffing plan, and why did you put these, extra members in that year? And that is because of how the EMT classes and bringing people along is basically changing from a 6-month class for somebody coming to the EMS service is now going into a year-long class just for basic EMT. So men and women that we have, and you looked at the numbers tonight that Tim had, showing you this 14,000 hours of training, all this other stuff that's going on, we will not be able to bring folks in and train and put them on the street to be street ready as fast. It's going to take us longer to do that. Or we change our concepts that we don't invest in people, and then we have to try to find only EMTs or paramedics that are already there, and then we run into the scale of economy where is everybody else, and what's happening is everybody else just keeps giving away, and we have to keep up to try to even have folks be able to staff certain apparatus or medic rigs or whatever it might be. So to answer that, we're trying to minimize that with all of the budgetary limitations that are happening inside the district. We know where the village is, we know where the townships are, and we're trying to feather that in as best as we possibly can to make that work for all of us around the table. Steve?
Just a quick question. Is there any, say, infrastructure grant dollars, state level, federal dollars, maybe you were the consultants, working towards a lot more?
I will just say right now, just with our current, keep in mind, we did get a staffing grant for the three more current years. I will say this very softly. This is no pun intended on either side of the quarter, Democrat or Republican, but working with any of the things that are happening at the federal government right now and trying to get grant money here and all that kind of stuff is, I will just tell you, very challenging, very taxing, and hours and hours and hours. Just in the true-up of Medicare and Medicaid, the stuff that we went through, and the hours that my men and women in the back basically worked on trying to obtain some money. Laura talks about, the lemon, how much you can squeeze, is the juice worth the squeeze and everything else. There's tremendous amount of hours going into for small little wins of probably 60, 80 hours for $19,000. You start looking at what we're paying our people, and really is it doing us any good? Every once in a while, I still see that there's some hope, and I think Laura can speak to this probably, and Jim a little bit. I think they have Baraboo and some the other stations that I'm currently knowing. There are some places where there's some opportunity, but it's going to be extremely limited and hard, and I'm definitely going to need assistance from the outside to make ourselves available for that.
Yeah, so a couple things there. So you mentioned Baraboo. So what Baraboo did is we're currently working with them. We've been working with them for about 4 years now. What they are doing is they are getting a USDA rural development loan. So they're doing a low interest long-term loan. So it's a 40-year loan. It's a low interest rate that was locked in. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but theirs was, because it's been so many years that we've been working with them. So that's one way that we can do it. As Glenn said, it is a very tedious process, and it does take a lot of time. So just be forewarned, can you do it? Absolutely, but it does take some effort. The second way that you can do it through the USDA is you can apply for a grant. So we're working with the Platteville Fire Department, and Platteville actually received a $7 million appropriations grant through Tammy Baldwin. With that, their station actually costs about $13 million. So with that extra $5 million, they actually did do the USDA loan as well, and then had some capital funds raised. So theirs was kind of a combination effort. I will say that we are working with a couple other departments. We were just speaking with Rhinelander, not yet, was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
Man, did we went fast or slow. Yesterday we were working with Rhinelander, and they had been earmarked for some money from the state government.
Appropriations.
Appropriations.
Tammy Baldwin.
Yep. And they just found out that all of the appropriations for the fire departments were removed, so they will not be getting anything. So have there been opportunities in the past? Yes. Should you continue to apply for them? Perhaps. Are you going to get them? We have no idea. One other thing that Tim brought up is FEMA was doing loans. So obviously our weather has been more dramatic lately. We've had a lot more a lot more hail, there've been more tornadoes. So one of the things that FEMA had been doing they have been giving grants for you to construct a tornado shelter. So when I was a kid, a tornado shelter was interior room, right? Currently, if you are building a tornado shelter, there's a standard called the ICC 500 that dictates exactly what the shelter has to be and how it has to be constructed. And you can definitely build one in your fire station. We do them outside of Wisconsin. Most of our departments are required to have them. It's an incredibly expensive square footage, but they are tornado safe. So what that means is that FEMA grant would help pay for that. But again, what I've been told is this past year, that money's dried up too. So not me, because I don't do schools, but a division of our Eau Claire office works with a lot of school districts. And every school district was trying to get one of these FEMA grants for the storm shelters. And every one of them has now not gotten the money because that money dried up.
I would add to that too is that what you're doing now in the fire district is absolutely essential to even be considered for a grant.
Yeah.
So you're laying the foundation for the opportunity for a grant that may arise, whether state or federal.
Yeah.
So without a conceptual plan in a study like this, you won't even be considered.
I mean, that's how Platteville got theirs, that's how Bearable got theirs.
Exactly, because they had done their homework ahead of time and they were prepared to go when a grant opportunity arose. Secondly, I would add that, yes, it does not look good for brick and mortar grant opportunities across the country today. However, AFG, Assistance of Firefighters Grant, is still a funded program. It's still an opportunity when AFG identifies things that typically go inside of a fire station. It's not brick and mortar necessarily, but it's everything. If we took the building upside down and shook it out, it's things like vehicle exhaust capture, decontamination equipment, PPE, compressors, things that you need inside of a station that may not be adequately sized currently, that you can also apply for grants. So you can help.
Soft cost.
Exactly, it's part of the soft costs in our FFE, et cetera. So you do have those that grant opportunity still exists, is what I'm trying to say. Short story long.
Yeah.
It still exists.
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities.
Right.
Not as many as
yeah.
before, but there certainly are.
And I've worked with Baldwin's office the last 3 years applying for grants. We're in a different hat, different situation.
Understand.
This year, I mean, can't even get anybody to answer the phone at this point. So.
Yeah, it'll change again after the next election. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. So keep trying, and we are connected with a lot of fire departments in this state. That's all we do. So whenever we have, the country, but specifically the state. So whenever we have opportunities, we make sure to tell other people, hey, this worked here. You can try that, but it didn't work there. And we try and keep you all as well informed as we can be. So.
Yeah, for example, the appropriations applications due usually in April of the previous year for 26 projects. Obviously, it was due April. So keeping on the radar March and April. I'm sorry I cut you off.
So my question was, when does the village have the borrowing capacity for a project of this size? What years? I think the towns probably have the borrowing capacity, so I think we're interested in your schedule.
I mean, it really comes down to tolerability for the village board, and in terms of risk, we're getting pretty close to our legal limit, but even our self-imposed policy limit. Looking at our CIP over the next 10 years, so there are good options and not so good options to make it happen sooner or later, depending on everyone's preference. But I'm sure we'd certainly like to use better options than worse options. So it's there. It's just it comes down to a policy choice of what is tolerable for our elected officials in our community.
Could I take Kathy's question and overlay a couple things? Sounds like it's not necessarily likely within 3 to 6 years, without policy change. Like that would not be your recommended span of time. If that's true, and if we don't know the dollar amount, a closer to final dollar estimate of the project, and we're looking for answers to questions that really, the 3 questions that you're asking the board to discuss. If we're looking for that, is it really a priority now? Are answers to that question a priority now when, in all likelihood, this isn't gonna happen in 3 to 6 years?
Well, I don't know that Martin stated that at all.
Well, in the absence of policy change, correct, I heard that.
Yeah.
But he also just said that his,
And
I
we
don't know if
have,
I go as far as recommendation, at least the outlook is that it would be longer than that. So I'm going for priorities, I'm going for trying to come up with estimates on your questions without having really all the answers, or without having enough information to really have a decent response to you.
Yeah, and Kent, I don't know if I can just say a couple things. So where you are right now is so typical. This is exactly where you should start. You should start thinking far out. And the reason I say that is because if there are properties that are gonna go up for sale, or if we have to vacate roads, or acquire multiple properties, or consolidate, or do any of those things, understanding that now is a really great place to start. It is so typical for us to work with departments for 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 12 years figuring this out. So I would say, yes, I do think that it is important that you start to have a conversation. And keep in mind too that if we were to get a site and we were to do that concept, we will have a much tighter range. Those numbers are off of a calculator typing in 32,000 square feet times 500 or whatever numbers we were using. So, yeah, I mean, that's a huge range. We don't know what we're building yet. But if we can start to narrow down where we want to look for properties and start that process moving forward, understanding what we need to budget toward, and then thinking about how we're going to get there, this is the proper foundation, in my opinion. And like I said, this is what we do with every department we work with. I can only think of maybe one department ever that we have worked with for under a year before we broke ground. It's just, this is very normal.
any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna kind of chime in here. I mean, you all probably know we had a failed referendum recently, and we don't feel like the appetite is there to do another one for at least a little bit. I would say probably 2028 at the very earliest, where we would consider another potential referendum to help pay for something like this, or you know, the additional operational stuff. I feel like it could be longer than that, but I feel like at least after 2028 November, things could change, and no judgments, I'm just saying, we have a reality of federal politics that we're dealing with that is affecting the affordability of this project, and something has the potential to change at that point. And then we might be looking at a potential referendum depending on our situation. I'm not saying nothing's a done deal, but realistically, I don't think it would happen before 2028 where we would start making any sort of commitment. That would be the earliest. Within another 3 years beyond, we don't know. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. Let's see where we're at.
From my perspective, I've been thinking of this as Project 2030.
Okay.
And that has helped me just sort of focus on what it would look like between now and then.
Right.
You know, is it likely to move a year forward or back? Maybe. But, you know, I mean, when we were up in La Crosse, that was one of the things I asked the fire chief was, how did you get the public support to spend the money?
Yeah.
And he said, well, it took us 20 years.
Yeah.
So I hope it doesn't take us 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a meeting last night for another department, and they were the second client that I met with when I started with the 5 Bugles group, and we're still trying to build that station. It takes time. We gotta be good taxpayers.
Can I bring it back to the questions, the sheet of questions to talk to the board about? My first reaction and kind of my second reaction is that it's premature. But I'd be happy to be talked off that ledge if the district board thinks that it's not. But it seems like we don't have enough information to feed into the discussion, and anything that we could get out to you would be so basic that I'm not sure it would be helpful. I don't think we can put I don't think we can put a number to it. You know, I don't think we can say, oh, we're committed, we're in for $5 million. I don't think we can say that because we don't know what the $5 million is buying. I don't know you were talking about appetite, the appetite of people to support that at the town level.
Well, I think
So-
some of what we were hoping for feedback on was, as we go through trying to figure out, should it be one station, should it be two stations? Do you have opinions on that? Okay.
That's what I'm saying, we can give you
Yes.
basic opinions, really
Right.
simple opinions based on.
And then, from a financial
Gut feel.
standpoint, are there windows that you feel more comfortable? Like, if this was a 2030 project, I feel like the debt capacity would not be an issue for us. But if you wanted to go 2027, no way. If there are constraints like that within your financial picture.
Right. Well, like Kathy
Share
said,
those.
I think most of the towns probably have way more debt capacity just because of the formula.
Maybe it's more of a question for the village then, because we've got a senior center project.
Now, we might have the capacity, but we've never really gone to that level.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think the other thing too, so again, I was with this community last night, and what those towns were saying was that they had an idea of how much they understood that their constituents would accept for a tax increase. And for example, that department, the tax increase was gonna be like $5.50 for every $100,000 per month, $5.50. And they felt that that was too much. So if that is too much, that's what, I guess what we have to figure out is, again, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, right? So what we did with that department and what we typically do is we say, hey, this concept is coming in and we're gonna use easy numbers. It's coming in at $15 million. And that means that you are gonna pay, I'm gonna do 16, because then everyone pays $4 million. You're 16, your group pays $4 million, every one of your taxpayers' taxes go up by $5. You come back and say, hey, we can only afford $4. We figure out how much that needs to cut, and then we work to see, is it possible for us to cut that much space? You can also do it the other way around, where you say, hey, our taxes can go up by this much, we do the math forward, and that's our budget, and then we work within that. However we would like to do it, but I think understanding what your tax base can take on, what they would feel comfortable with, is a really important thing to know. So, and I don't know, like, does that take more than a month to figure out? It's up to you all. You know, we can pause our services until you have determined what needs to happen. It's entirely up to you. Often though, people want to see a concept before they start saying, yeah, I'd be willing to pay $4 a month for that new building. And that's right, it's like I said, it's a chicken and an egg. You can come at it from either direction.
And you will have a concept and a estimate of cost at the end of this study.
Correct.
So we're not asking you to commit X million of dollars right now. We're just asking you, is it okay that we continue to move forward? Do we want to look at the expense of a two-station operation, change what we're trying to do here as we go forward, or change what Laura's trying to do? Or do we want to try to maintain the fiscal responsibility and maintain one station and staff and fund that to what we've been doing for the past years? We know we need a different facility. We know we don't have room for the equipment we have. Don't have room, obviously, for the equipment we need in the future. But just an example of Rutland. In 2015, we put plans together to create a new town hall. It was about 7,000 square feet, $900,000 bill, and they voted it down. So 2024, we build a new building with less than 5,000 square feet, $2 million. And had we built that building before, it would be paid off by now. So we know we need it. At some point, we need to move forward. And we're just hoping to get an idea from you over the next couple weeks is, do you like the way we're moving forward? Do you like the ideas? Do you like the concepts? If we get an absolute no, there's no reason for us to keep going.
No.
So, you know, we just want some feedback. And it's your feedback that allows us to make decisions going in the future.
If I could suggest too, Ken, if your feedback goes beyond these questions, then yes, that's we're welcome too. So maybe we're not addressing your concerns. We'd like to know those as well.
I just had a quick question for the village. You know, again, I'm not even sure what it's called, this downtown future planning.
Master plan.
Okay. Has this been part of that conversation? Is this, this 3 acres, which is a big chunk, really, is that going to this concept or is being considered within that?
If I may, wasn't there a charge to take into consideration if the fire department should be there or not? It was really outside the scope of what we asked them to do. So the short answer is there's really no information in the plan that says, yes, the fire department should stay here and it should take up this space. It's more of a political decision as to what the village would commit to a fire department. Not, and I think part of that issue, and this has come up with other things, is it maybe should have been called Downtown Master Concepts, because it's really not a plan. In fact, more than a few of us, they showed fountains in some of the, and we started getting emails saying, why am I paying for a fountain downtown? So, as you can see, but it really wasn't part of their charge to take the fire department into consideration, because it's really, again, back to the village board to make those decisions.
But it seems pretty important that maybe it should be considered. I mean, not have 2 parallel things going on.
Well, we didn't know what we were dealing with either. Like, we've been thinking for a long time about what to do with the village hall. Is that something that would potentially get torn down to expand a fire station? But we didn't know how much space we needed. This is the first time we're hearing about square footage. So we had to move based on the information we had at the time. So it wasn't factored in, because how do you factor in something that you have no idea what the parameters are? So that's kind of where I was.
I'm sorry, I have a really quick question. In terms of cost, is there a phasing option in the sense of acquiring said land, letting that be, and then, do you often see that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of architecture, we call 5 phases, and right now we're in phase -1, so we're not even to the design phase yet. Once we get there, yeah, maybe -3. Once we get there, there are the 5 phases. So schematic design, that's when we actually start putting windows, walls, and doors and start understanding what we're building. Then we move into design development, which we really start figuring out what does this casework look like? What does the ceiling look like? What kind of door hardware are we going to have? And then we get into the construction documents. At each one of those phases, you could have us go to that phase and stop at that phase and just pay for that portion. And at the end of every one of those phases that I just mentioned, you would have an updated estimate that will start to narrow in a little bit better than the concept square foot estimate that you'd have. So for a lot of our departments, especially when they're going to referendum, what we do is we do the concept, we work it through, and then we actually do a portion of that first phase, schematic design. Sometimes it's the full phase. It's a 20% document set, and you could stop the design process right there, go to referendum so that people can see, hey, this is about what we're doing. We're trying to figure it out, but we've got a pretty fair idea here and have a very solid number, and then get hopefully a yes vote on that referendum, and then we can move into the next phase of the design. That community that I was mentioning that I was working with last night, they're actually approving our contract every single phase. So we had permission to do schematic design, we went back, we had permission then to move into design development, we went back, and now we're looking for permission to move into construction documents. And we've, like I said, we've been working with this department for years. So yeah, you can absolutely do that.
One of the, we talked about soft costs, and I'll just put this out there so everybody can think about added cost or any project we do, but soft cost, by design already, our commission has been making things last inside of our operation, SCBA, fill station, different equipment inside of there. We have been fixing and have been testing and making sure it works to today's standard, but most of that stuff is 15 or 20 years old. It's already at its shelf life. We had it in capital plans, and by design, instead of spending $85,000 or $100,000 to rebuild a fill station. We did not purchase stuff. We fix things. And we know when all of this happens, these soft costs that Laura's talking about, we are going to need to put these soft costs in. So going back to Carl's question, from my point, going back to that capital, that CIP plan, and trying to stair step some of this stuff so that we can identify, we already know what we need to put into this, but it really is hard to predict when this is going to happen, to drop this stuff in so that you have it for any station build or any project. And that goes along with the staffing or going back to 1 or 2 stations and everything else. So there's just a whole bunch of planning, and somebody around, the people around the table have to kind of give me some direction. It's easy to plug the numbers in, but I got to have some direction. So, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Do you have a question? The blue shirt?
Jim.
We're talking 1 or 2 stations, okay? If we have 1 station, we need to know where we want to put it.
Yep.
If we want 2, we know where 1 is going to be now, doing the other one. Where's the other one going to be, and what kind of cost for that property to buy?
Yep.
That's what we need to know too.
Yeah, so.
We know what we need.
Yeah, so looking at the GIS right now, it's saying that your second location would be just south of 138 on Highway 14, Hillside Road and Highway 14 is where the second station, right now, the GIS is saying you would need to have it. Now, if what Phil is saying, that we are going to expand more to the west and to the south, perhaps 5 years from now, that'll shift that second station over more, but currently, that's what it's saying, that's where that second station will go. To be very honest, it's very typical for us to see one staying in the downtown though, just because there's always so much action there, and then that satellite station can go. And you know, again, looking to the future, if you guys keep growing, think of other communities that are a little bit larger than you. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 stations, and they kind of spread them all around. So.
Yeah, and the 2-station concept may end up being 20 years from now.
Yeah. Yep.
But not as part of this project over the next few months or years.
It is surely not in any staffing plans today. Keep in mind, the staffing plans, you have to have people to put in stations to make them operable.
You gotta have stations too.
Yeah.
And put it in the right spot. So maybe your 138 on 14, with the growth of the village is not accessible, you might wanna look over to the west one, or southwest. And that's all something that needs to be looked at.
Yep.
So if you expect the rest of us to budget, we need some numbers with it and some cost of land and stuff. So we can kind of figure out a future budget.
Yep. But at this time, we're not looking at buying additional land for a second station.
And we need to know where the first one, where the one's gonna go then.
Right. Yeah.
One thing that came out tonight, everybody agreed, I think, was the importance of health and well-being of the firefighters and EMS personnel. It's a crucial thing that needs to happen, regardless of if we push this to 2030 or perhaps even later. So that's something I think we should consider as a group moving forward, that has to happen sooner than that. And how we go about doing that with our current facility the way it exists now.
Thank you, yes. That was really important to learn that, how our firefighters are dealing with decontamination and how we're looking after their health and safety.
Yeah.
That was quite an education tonight, thank you.
Yeah, it's actually wild, so I'm just gonna, I know you guys wanna get home, but 9/11 was obviously a horrific accident, but what it did is it got a lot of firefighters from a lot of different areas, or a lot of emergency responders from a lot of different areas in one spot. And suddenly 10 years later, they were all getting the same exact cancers. And that's how we figured it out. So way back in the day, in that photo from 1960 that we saw at the very beginning, the fires that they were fighting were wood, gypsum, they were solid materials without a lot of like chemicals in them. Now we are fighting fires that have chemicals in them. So like this flooring, those ceiling tiles, the laminate over here, they have chemicals in them that now we're fighting those much different fires, and it's causing all these health issues. It's really an amazing, not amazing in a good way, amazingly bad, how dramatic that is. And it's been a really interesting development.
thankfully our PPE is getting better.
Yeah.
The level of protection that we're doing because of the decontamination process. But if you don't have the facilities for the process now, that risk continues.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so if, let's say we find out about some land that becomes available, that's maybe not downtown. But like, I mean, is it a really involved process for us to come to you and say, hey, what if we put it here?
Absolutely.
How does that affect the response times? We can use you as a resource and do that kind of thing.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
we have
Like I
11
said-
locations that we've identified that Tim and other people have brought up. So we have a lot of that data already.
And
Yeah, but if there
that
are-
stuff's on the web already.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, September 24th, 6:30 PM. Meeting back here again, please. Look forward to having you, and Laura will be bringing some additional data. Yeah. So, looking for adjournment, the town of Rutland. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Town of Dunn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Votes aye, we're adjourned.
Town of Oregon.
Without objection, the town of Oregon meeting is adjourned.
Second.
Village of Oregon.
Without objection, the village of Oregon is adjourned.
Fire Commission. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.